Testing, testing, 1 3 1 3. Testing, testing, 1 3 1 3. Hello, hello, hello. Y'all hear me okay? Yeah, I know I'm slightly late, but just barely, right? Just barely. We can we can let it slide. Maybe a little bit. Maybe we could let it slide. We could let it go. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. I'll give you the late points. This is fair. It's what, 1 late point, 2 late points. Uh, Let me see. Only a minute? 1 minute? All right, that's not bad. Minus 10 late points. We tolerate it to. Okay, so I'm about to hit the minute mark of streaming, so let me see what time it is. Minute mark. Okay, so it's 1 late point for you guys. 1 late point for you guys is what it looks like. We can do the proof thing if you demand the proof. We can play that game. I think when it comes to the proof game, I'm like 99-1. There was one time I was wrong about it, but you know, generally I've had a pretty good record. Let's see. Luffy is cooked, shake my head. Yeah, this is great. This is great. I'm so excited for next week's video. I'm so excited for next week's video. Super duper excited. Hold on. Yeah, late penalties. We're pretty high on the late penalties now. Here, let me share. Okay. I think I gotta change. Yeah, so this is gonna share this screen for the moment. So let me get rid of that. Whoa, what is this? This is that. Get rid of that. Okay, okay, should be good. Okay, let's bump it up. 171. You guys let me know. Or no, it's 170. It's 1 late point. You guys let me know what you wanna. What do we wanna? Do you want to spend on anything? Do you want to spend on anything? I'm very excited to talk about this chapter. Really excited to talk about this chapter. Have I seen the emu parrot theory? I did see the emu parrot theory. I did finally look through it. It's not a bad. It's. I don't know if I believe it or not. The first thing I'll say is that I'm upset that somebody could go out there and say emu's a parrot, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's very possible. But if I go out and I make one little video about Luffy being born out of an egg, then everybody loses their minds. I'll just say that. So first of all, I'm like, okay, if we're going down this route where emu could be a parrot, why can't Luffy come out of an egg? It sounds like you think emu came out of an egg. That's all I'll say. Anyway, I'm curious about the I'm curious about the the parrot theory. I don't personally believe it, but it's one of those where it's like it could work. You know, it could be legit. Even the wings that come out, right? They're feathery wings, so it's like wonder if there's something. I don't know. How does it feel to be a Sixers fan now, Morge? I think it's legitimately going to be difficult for me to be a Sixers fan. I don't know if I'm going to have my heart in it. So, because a couple reasons. Hold on, let me swap back. So, hold on. First, let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. I'm very excited for next week's video. I got some supers to catch up on. Let me knock those out, then I'll mention the Sixers thing. The only thing I'll say about the Sixers is that I don't like the rest of the team, right? So I'm not an Embiid fan, stuff like that. So it's going to be difficult. Before, LeBron on the Lakers, easy to root for. Once Luka was added to the Lakers, it became even easier to root for because it's like now, at the time, LeBron was my favorite player. Luka at the time was my favorite next generation player, right? So it was like the perfect molding. I really wanted that one to work out. Didn't work out, is what it is. Now it's kind of like LeBron at 42 years old with Joel Embiid, a player I don't like. I actually kind of like Jaylen Brown to some degree, despite his controversies or whatever. And I don't know. I don't. And also, I've come to just think the Sixers as a franchise is a stupid franchise. I've just slowly grown to dislike it. And I know I've said before I don't really like or dislike franchises. I realized I have negative feelings that have accumulated over time towards the 76ers franchise. I think they've just done so much. I just don't like them. So it's going to be hard because now LeBron, it's easier to root for LeBron when it's like, oh, there's a shot at him winning the championship. Now it's like, he actually does have a really good shot, though, is the thing. I'm just like, do I want to see LeBron win as like the third or fourth option and have to root for Embiid the whole time? I think I'm down for it. I'm going to support that team, but it might be difficult. I'll see how I feel over the course of the year. All right, anyway, let's get into the supers. Top tier trivia, so thanks for 5. More, this video is good for the environment, recycling. Hockey, not devil fruit, is what Luffy needs to upgrade. Joy Boy equals Luffy, end of story. Even versus Blackbeard, just being a hockey bloom. All right. So that is a fair critique of my last video. 100% fair critique of my last video. The next set of videos that you guys are getting, promise, full effort. All right, full effort. Last video was almost like you guys got to understand, we got break weeks and shit, right? We got break weeks and stuff like that. A certain part of me was like, do we even, what am I necessarily doing with this video, you know? I almost thought about skipping a week, but I was like, would it be better to skip a week or just put out something that's, kind of fun speculation or whatever? I put out fun speculation. You will not see more of that from me, promise. This week's video is going to be a fun one. I'm excited to write it. And the video that comes out after that, I think, is an interesting video where I delve into Imu's the video after this next video. The first video I want to do is talk about Luffy as a character. And I haven't done a video talking about Luffy as a character in quite some time because there's been nothing to fucking talk about for this dude as a character. He's been a fucking meme for a while, right? Now I'm interested in talking about Luffy as a character. So I'm excited for next Tuesday's video. Video after that is delving into Imu's powers to some degree. So anyway, yeah. Taptio Treviso, thanks for 2. I like Imu treats Luffy 100% different from Joy Boy. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's not like, I think reincarnation stuff can be put to bed at this point. Hopefully. Let's get the Streamlights up to 50 real quick. Pool of Dead 3088, thanks for the 10. Do you think Eris will end up going insane or something and tell Teach that Rox's death was Whitebeard, Roger, and Garp's fault? Would be interesting to see Eris as a crazy old lady manipulating Blackbeard. I think there's got to be some level of that, right? Because it's just like, why? The stuff she must have told him is what set him down this path, right? Obviously, he saw the evils of the Celestial Dragon, and that was traumatic for him as a 2-year-old or whatever he was, right? How old was he? 2? I forget. 1, 2, whatever. But obviously that's traumatic. But then at the same time, it's just like, is that the only thing that because she told him a lot of other stuff, right? Because he seems to have a game plan from the get-go. It seems like she shared a lot of information with him, you know? I wouldn't be surprised if your theory is correct, Pool of Dead. Justin, thanks for 2. Hope this defeat gives us Luffy depth in the future. I don't think we're ever going to see, like, a truly deep, introspective version of Luffy. That's just not in his character. It's just not who he is. For better or worse, he's a unique character because that's not a part of who he is. But we've definitely seen certain defeats in the past rock Luffy in a way that makes him a little bit reflective. And that's all I really ask for him as a character. That's all I can really ask for, because that's never happened once in the New World. I think this defeat has a lot of the makings of the classic sort of moments. I don't want to spoil this Tuesday's video, but I think Oda's got a very interesting pattern when it comes to how he writes Luffy's defeats and why certain things, like, let's say, I don't want to get too into it. There's certain commonalities with how he writes defeats that you can kind of project how much is going to affect Luffy going forward. And this has all of the makings of it. This is a really good one. I love that this whole chapter was just dedicated to showing Luffy at his absolute most broken and beaten. I really, really love that. Magnus9450, thanks for the 5. End of story, Sanji upscale. Zoro getting pinned down by Sommers. Conquers Haki on the way. Face it, this is our era, Sanji Nation. Zoro's got to break out Ashura. I think that's what we're looking at this point. Zoro's got to break out Ashura. I don't know how strong Sommers is supposed to be in this scenario. I really don't know how strong Sommers is supposed to be right now. We don't know how strong the Omen buffs are. We don't know how strong the weapons that Emu granted them are. So it's really hard to tell what we're supposed to feel in this whole situation in terms of like, is Zoro, he's not fighting a first mate level character anymore, right? At this point it's got to be something higher, right? But it's so weird to me to think that Sommers could potentially be admiral level or something at this point. That feels like, I don't know, it's just kind of crazy. End of story, Sanji upscale. This arc is doing such wonders for Sanji in terms of just giving him clear benchmarks that he is set to surpass by the end of the series. Scopper Gaban is like a godsend. And I love Gaban. I don't know if I like Gaban better than Rayleigh or not. It's pretty close. I like them both better than Roger, which is fucking hilarious. I wouldn't have thought I would say that. But after watching all the flashbacks and everything, I like these two characters quite a bit. Pool of Dead, thanks for the 2. Are you caught up on Hunter x Hunter? Also watch the Odyssey. I did catch up on Hunter x Hunter actually last stream. I haven't had time to sit down and do my whole reread that I was hoping to do. Odyssey, we tried to watch this last weekend. Super fucking hard to get tickets. We might do this weekend if we can get tickets. I just didn't get time to plan it. So we definitely want to watch the Odyssey in theaters. My fiance and I, we want to watch the Odyssey in theaters, but just tickets are a bitch to come by right now. Tio, thanks for the 250 recycled break week videos or one Wano analysis. So the thing is, with break weeks, that's normally fine as long as Oda's sticking to his usual cadence. But you know, before when it's 3 chapters, 1 break, 3 chapters, 1 break, all good. But right now, it's totally different because it feels like, I don't want to say we get one One Piece chapter every 2 weeks, but it almost feels like that. So, like, usually when Oda does his breaks spaced out where you get 3 weeks of chapters and then a break, right? So the break week means that there's 2 videos for 2 weeks, right? To be filled. So usually at the end of one of those 3 chapter runs, there's actually a lot I want to talk about. And so the break week's a good opportunity for me to get out the topics that I've kind of built out in my head over the course of that 3 chapter run. When Oda's kind of taking a break every 1 to 2 chapters, it's not quite the same, because then it's just, I don't want to force a theory, and if something hype happened, that's really cool to talk about, but if there's not anything meaningful or deep, then it's also hard to talk about anything analysis-wise, right? This chapter gave us a ton, so I'm very excited. So got 2 videos coming for you guys. Next Tuesday's video, I think, will be a good one about Luffy's character. Let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. Rude How, thanks for the 5. We should have seen all these magic weapons, non-Devil Fruit related, coming when Enma was revealed to be so magical. Where Usopp magic weapon at? I am genuinely, this is wild. This is wild. I don't truly have a theory. I have a bit of a theory on the weapons, generally on Imu's full sort of power set, right? But really getting to the bottom of like Omen and Maki and stuff like that, and what his abilities, how his abilities seem to work like. But the weapons themselves, it's just we've never seen this before, right? The Vipes says, Moore's BTW, the TCB translations are wrong and omitted some important stuff and got some stuff wrong too, in case you didn't know, like Shanks saying no one can beat Emu in 800 years. That's okay, because I saw other translations floating around on Twitter and stuff like that at the moment. So I'll wait for the viz, but it does sound like it does sound like it's, assuming that those translations that are floating around online are accurate, then I'm really curious why TCB changed it to that degree. But I don't know. Where's Usopp magic weapon at? Hey, I still think Usopp's gonna get Ragnar, personally. I still think he's gonna get his hands on that for a little bit. Wilson, thanks for Wilson4598, thanks for the 2. What if Blackbeard wins Loki from the Straw Hats and Davy back? I just don't I don't think Loki's gonna join the Straw Hats in the first place. Loki's too strong to be on the Straw Hats it would be called the Loki Pirates at that point. Right? So I think Loki's too strong to join the Straw Hats. And then on top of that, I think not just Loki being too strong, even if for whatever reason Loki did join the Straw Hats, he wouldn't just work for Blackbeard because Blackbeard won him in a game. So I don't think that would happen either. I think Loki just wouldn't give a shit. Oh, Pool of Dead with a question after my own heart. Thanks for the 5. Will Smoker actually become relevant in an arc again? Real ones remember Smoker for Nakama. Smoker, I cannot state this enough. If you watch my streams, you know how I state this a million fucking times. Smoker was once the most prominent side character in One Piece. He was like, I wouldn't say the honorary Straw Hat, but he was our main character on the Marines outside the Straw Hats. It was the Straw Hat Pirates, and then our other only major recurring character was fucking Smoker. He was like the pre-time skip version of Law. Not really. He never dominated an arc, but he was like that dude that kept sticking around, you know? It's just sad. Smoker for Nakama. Yeah, I wish for that. One Piece fan 74, thanks for the 5. If old Gaban can fight Emu, then how stronger were him and Rayleigh in their prime? If I think people are getting ahead of themselves a little bit. I think it's cool that Gaban jumped in, right? But I don't expect this to... It's not like he blocked a full power swing from Emu or anything like that, you know? This kind of feels to me like when Luffy flew in for the punch for Emu the first time around. With Gaban, we've already seen a good amount of him in action, right? So we already saw that much younger Gaban, arguably prime Gaban, 14 years younger, right? So 14 years ago, that would have been 6 years after, sorry if my math's a little fuzzy, but that would have been like shortly after Rogers, after the Roger Pirates separated, right? Back then, that version of Gaban, he and Shanks together, plus all of Elbaf's army, couldn't do jack shit to Harold, right? So we've already seen Gaban in action. He is very strong, but he shouldn't even be remotely close to Emu, you know? So I wouldn't go too much off of just this one panel, because I think that's setting up for disappointment. I think it's really cool that he can still show out and stop someone like be fast enough and have the hockey and everything to stop someone like Emu. I don't think it's going to last that long. Frankly, even if we look at the fight between Gaban and Sommers, forget how strong you think Gaban was in his prime. I personally think Rayleigh and Gaban were Yonko level in their prime, personally. But if you look at Gaban versus Sommers, so the level that Gaban is now, it's not like he just immediately defeats Sommers. It's a low diff, but it's not like when prime Rayleigh, let's not compare Gaban and Rayleigh, because Rayleigh was in his prime, right? I kind of assume Gaban scales roughly to Rayleigh, okay? But I'm saying, let's say prime Rayleigh, he actually one-shotted Sommers right away, right? So Gaban at this age still needs to work a little bit and use named moves and stuff like that to take down someone like Sommers before Sommers even got his power-ups with Omen and stuff like that, right? So I think with that context in mind, if you can't just like walk through Sommers immediately right now, I don't think Gaban is going to do too well against Emu next chapter. And that's not any Gaban shade. That's just, he's fucking old now, you know? And yeah, even closer to his prime 14 years ago, he couldn't really do much against even, Harold with Shanks at his side and the giant army. So I would just temper expectations a little bit for Gaban. If he really surprises me next chapter, well, I hope that Oda would keep it consistent, just because, yeah, if you can't show Gaban basically unable to do anything to Harold when he's much stronger in his youth, and then have Gaban actually hold out against Emu for some time, I think that'd be a little confusing. So just for consistency, but yeah. I personally think Gaban and Rayleigh, I just think the whole old generation, I think Roger, Rox, Whitebeard, Harold, Garp, I think they were all a step above the likes of Kaido and Big Mom in their prime, so quote-unquote Yonko level. And I think Rayleigh and Gaban in their primes were in the Yonko tier, whatever you would say, you know? I think ever since we saw old Rayleigh, hold off Kizaru for that long. It's just like, okay, then Prime Kizaru is going to be at least a tier above Kizaru. Sorry, Prime Rayleigh is going to be at least a tier above Kizaru, right? It wouldn't really make sense if, like, okay, Rayleigh in his prime is still just, like, okay, only slightly stronger, now equal to Kizaru or whatever. I don't know. And I scale Gabon roughly to Rayleigh. I think they're probably pretty close. Tiptio, thanks for the 2. Think Blackbeard and Akainu are greater than Emu and Grudge with Luffy? By the way, guys, I'm fucking loving Elbaf right now. How's everyone feeling about Elbaf? Like, this chapter is low-key... Sorry, I'm gonna answer your question to you, but you just got me thinking. Because this is the first chapter that's made me feel like... Shit, it's made me feel like, in a while, that, oh my god, Emu might have just pushed himself forward in the odds for final villain of One Piece. Like, this is the first chapter I really feel like he pushed himself forward. Let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. This was just I still think Blackbeard's the final villain. I think just the fact that Emu's coming first, etc. But it's just like, man, this is crazy shit. You know, this is crazy stuff what's happening right now. Phenomenal chapter for Emu. This is what I would have loved Luffy versus Kaido to have felt like, which is actually, you know, not just haha hee hee, aren't you having fun, Kaido, yada yada. This is actually like, I'm a fucking villain. I'm gonna brutally crush you, and then everyone you love and care about after this, right? This is great stuff. To me, Emu's already pushed himself into being one of the best villains in One Piece. Frankly, a lot of being one of the best villains in One Piece simply comes down to how much does it feel like the stakes and tension change? How is your dynamic with the hero? This is next level stuff here. This is next level stuff. A villain hasn't really been brutal to Luffy like this since Crocodile. Because Kaido fucked up Luffy multiple times, but they were all quickies, you know? It's kind of like Kaido knocked him out, and then the next time Luffy wakes up, he's an udon, yada yada. Kaido knocks Luffy out a few times on the roof, but it's all quick. Like, this is kind of this is how I felt like when Luffy got taken out by Crocodile both those times, which is, it feels like he wants to drive in a knife and then twist it and really talk down to Luffy, make him feel the pain of the defeat, etc. That's what I really, really, really enjoy about what we're getting right here. NewX72 says, fine, love it, finally a villain that doesn't put up with the Gear 5th stupid gimmick. I still like Gear 5th, but this is stuff I was hoping, like, I wouldn't want Gear 5th's tone shift, right? It makes everything funny, silly, etc. I wouldn't want that tone shift to make it so that One Piece couldn't have scenarios like this again. Yeah, Tiptio, I think Blackbeard and Akainu greater than Emu and Grudge with Luffy. It's tricky because I feel like Emu's grudge with Luffy is conceptual. So it's the fact that Luffy is the current Nika Fruit user. Emu views him as this knockoff version of Joy Boy. Most of Emu's hate towards Luffy is kind of seeing this, seeing the ghost of Joy Boy and projecting that onto Luffy. Does that make sense? I don't mean in a literal sense, I mean in symbolic sense, right? He sees Luffy as the ghost of Joy Boy, right? That's why Emu hates Luffy so much. With Blackbeard and Akainu, I don't think Blackbeard's funny. I don't think Blackbeard dislikes Luffy. That's the funny one to me, because that's actually one of the most fun dynamics that we've had in One Piece. Now that I think about it, which is, think about this. So in most storylines, right? Akainu fucking hates it. So let's go through this, right? Akainu fucking hates Luffy because Akainu just hates pirates in general. He views Luffy as this one who got away. Everything Luffy stands for, right? Son of Dragon, yada yada. Akainu really hates Luffy for that. I would argue it's a little bit more personal than it is with Emu, but you could debate it either way. Right? And then Luffy hates Akainu because it's very, 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 very personal, right? what it kind of did to Ace. Blackbeard is a unique dynamic with he has a very unique dynamic with Luffy in the story, in that Blackbeard is the only villain in One Piece that I can think of where the hate is one-sided and actually from Luffy's end to the other person. Because what do we get in One Piece over and over, right? We get villains like Crocodile, Enel, Doflamingo, yada yada, where it's like, who the fuck is this punk that showed up and is fucking up all my plans? And it's like, I'm Luffy. Nice to meet you. I'm going to be king of the pirates, right? That's the general vibe of those dynamics. Luffy often does tend to build his own personal hatred with these villains, but the dynamics we usually see is kind of like either the villain just straight up hates Luffy, or is pissed off and annoyed by Luffy, like a Wapol, like an Enel, whoever, and Luffy's just there to fuck their shit up. Or it becomes mutually antagonistic, like Luffy and Crocodile, because over the course of multiple interactions, Luffy grows to hate the person as well, right? But we never see... Blackbeard is the only villain in the series where the hate is one-sided, and it's only from Luffy. I don't think Blackbeard hates Luffy. I think Blackbeard finds Luffy to be entertaining and like a fun little wild card in this whole... I'm sure Blackbeard knows some stuff about the Nika fruit and stuff as well, but Blackbeard's actually got no personal beef with Luffy. He finds Luffy funny, in a sense, you know? Obviously Blackbeard would take down Luffy and his crew happily if it furthered his own goals, like we saw in the pre-time skip, and he'll probably do that post-time skip if he needs the Nika fruit and stuff. But it's nothing personal from Blackbeard's end. It's just like, pirates gotta do what a pirate's gotta do. And that's what makes the dynamic so funny, because Luffy hates Blackbeard so much, right? He hates Blackbeard so much. And I feel like this is one of the cases where Luffy gets to be on the receiving end of his usual shtick, which is usually Luffy is just this dude that, like, he's just going about his business. He's like, Wapol, fuck you, sorry, but I gotta take you down. Enel, fuck you, but I gotta ring this bell, so I'm just gonna walk through you or whatever, right? Luffy's kind of doing that, and then the villain just hates him so much because he's like, do you have any idea how fucked up what you're doing is to me? Like, blah, 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 right? So that's kind of the appeal of Luffy, in that he's just this, like, wandering troublemaker, right? But with Blackbeard, it's almost reversed, where Blackbeard's like, sorry, bro, I gotta capture you for, like, the world government or whatever, but... you know, okay, I captured your brother, but hey, good luck trying to save him. Like, sincerely, nothing in the world's impossible. Can you imagine that? The villain telling the hero, like, I believe in you, nothing in this world's impossible? That's what Blackbeard tells Luffy in Impel Down. It's just like, fuck you. I fucking hate you, dude. I think that's hilarious, that Blackbeard's this villain who puts Luffy on the receiving end of their usual shtick, where from Blackbeard's end, it's just all business, you know? Like, I don't mind you, but, you know, I just got to take you down for my, you know, just because you're in the way. And then for Luffy, it's very, very personal, because it's like, you took my brother from me, I hate you, yada, yada. So, anyway, love that dynamic. Sorry, got off topic a little bit. Yeah, look, Blackbeard, Emu, here, let me throw another poll. I'm just always curious how people feel about the final villain debate, Blackbeard, final mentor of Luffy. But... yeah, I think I still lean Blackbeard, but I'm always curious how chapter to chapter people's feelings change. Let's see. I think generally whenever I've asked this question in the last several times, it's always swung towards like about a 60-40. All right, everyone's still on Blackbeard. Cool. Or 60-40 still. All-in-one, thanks for the 2. Emu's weapons being the original 20 blades is sick. Yeah, that, and I people were theorizing that earlier. That is such a cool reveal. It's just strange because it's like, why do those weapons have powers? Is there something we don't... maybe the fruit... are those all swords that ate devil fruits, do you guys think? Like, what is the deal with that? Or is it a different technology? Different sort of thing. All right, people still 60, over 60-40, 60, 65-35. Interesting. Tala Jahan, welcome to the Yonko tier. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very, very much for joining. At this point, zero chance Usopp gets more overall focus in the arc than Zoro and Sanji, and definitely not more character growth than Sanji. Disappointing as fuck. Sorry, I skipped a few. Here, sorry. I saw your Yonko post, so let me get to your actual question later. But thank you very much for joining, Tala. You must be loving the Sanji stuff. I'll get to your question after everybody else's questions in order. Sorry, mix things up there. Deptio, thanks for the 2. Emu's trying to honorably execute Luffy with axe. Yeah, honorably execute Luffy with axe. I think it's cool that when he pulled out the axe was when Gaban showed up. Rud Howe, thanks for the 2. Smoker victim to series not being 5 years. OG plan. But I think Smoker's a victim to the series not being 5 years. I disagree with that because I think that Oda's general game plan never changed. The broad strokes of the story. It sounds like the broad strokes of One Piece never really shifted, right? He's always talked about how the ending and the main elements always remain the same. He's talked about how he views the Shichibukai as having expanded the story, right? So, if we look back, I think a lot of the elements that Oda's talked about, defeating the Yonko, right, and the world government, it was likely, you can kind of imagine a version of the story where essentially the Strides get past East Blue, and then and then it's on the Grand Line. It's basically about defeating the 4 emperors who run the Grand Line, and then the world government. And 5 years was probably never realistic, but you can kind of imagine a world where the story's at least much shorter, right? If you go through East Blue, then the Grand Line, etc. I feel like what happened is after they got through East Blue, Oda kind of realized that the Grand Line itself, you need to split it up into 2 halves, right? First half, and then the New World. And then the Yonko get pushed to the second half. And then you have these batches of villains that kind of fill out the first half, right? Many of those being Shichibukai, like, obviously, like Crocodile, like Moria, right? But then that even plays into the second half where Oda still doesn't want to get to the Yonko too fast, so that he has them go through characters like Doflamingo. So to me, it's characters like Crocodile, Moria, Doflamingo, and stuff that really, it's possible CP9 was stuff that he thought of partway through to flesh out the story, you know? So you can imagine a version of, like, if Oda just wanted to hit the main plot points of the story, he could have just squeezed everything in through after East Blue, the Yonko, etc., right? And then just tone down, or make characters get faster, stronger a lot faster, have Haki become a thing a lot faster, yada yada, right? Now, does that mean that Smoker was essentially a victim of all this? I think Smoker probably wasn't, because Smoker is one of the key elements introduced in the story in East Blue itself, you know? East Blue is interesting because it feels like East Blue has no wasted material. I think outside of the villains or villains of the week, every other character introduced in East Blue is a big fucking deal. Roger, King of the Pirates, right? Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon, all endgame, really big picture stuff, right? Even fucking Garp introduced in East Blue. Kobe, right? Stop me when you hear a character that's not going to be a big deal down the line, right? All of these are endgame figures. There is no fluff really in East Blue. And then you've got Smoker and Tashigi. And even fucking Buggy, the first villain, right? But then you've got Smoker and Tashigi, right? Smoker and Tashigi. And that's really interesting because he chooses to end East Blue with that, and he says that these characters are following them into the Grand Line. And I almost feel like it's not even about Smoker. Tashigi herself, it seems like Oda wrote her as being important for his future plans for Zoro's story, right? Because that whole connection with her and Queen At, so far it seems kind of random, and we don't really get what Oda's trying to do with that. But I almost feel like Tashigi's existence and dropping that in before the whole Grand Line part of the story continues, right? Assuming Oda does have the end game of the story always planned, that suggests that there's something that he's always wanted to do with Zoro and Tashigi that is significant to the broader scheme of things. It's just we don't know what yet, you know? I maybe it's been dropped, maybe Oda decided it's not important, but Smoker really is the odd man out in that it's not even just the point in the story where he was introduced seemed to be a point where Oda was laying the essential groundwork for the rest of the narrative, you know? Abe Kader, thanks a lot. Does Shanks gas confirm Emu final villain? No, because Shanks also Shanks also gasses Blackbeard, you know? I think it confirms that Emu has the role of big bad final boss right now. But to me, it's kind of like it's a video game where it's like there's the final boss who seems like the final boss, and then you get to the end of the game and it's like, surprise, this is the true final boss, you know? Has Morge's hairline receded or just me? I came out of the shower. I came out of the shower. That's what. You will watch this hair dry over the course of this this stream. Just relax. That's just what happens. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 100. Talha, your question was, at this point, zero chance Usopp gets more overall focus in the arc than Zoro and Sanji, and definitely not more character growth than Sanji. Disappointing as fuck. I strongly disagree. Hard disagree. Usopp, I'm sold. Oda is doing something big with Usopp this arc. Something big with Usopp this arc. Because we just got the observation haki this chapter. The first chapter since Dressrosa that we got observation haki brought back up for Usopp. And Oda's dropping it in a nice subtle little way, right? Nice subtle little way. So, I think we're ready to cook here. I think the fact that Oda's saving Usopp for last, all the other Strats are going to get their shit first, right? Oda's slow playing Usopp, which means Usopp is going to be the biggest, you know? Robin got her moment. She might still have stuff as the arc progresses or whatever. Brook, we're in the middle of his... Brook, Zoro, and Sanji, all three of them were in the middle of their major character stuff. Whatever their character stuff is supposed to be. Brook, Shuri. Zoro's got to figure out his shit. And then Sanji, of course, he's got to bring out the king within, right? Usopp, Oda signposted from that Usopp and Emu interaction that we're going to see a different version of Usopp here. And Oda's dropping little crumbs. We've got Usopp observation haki coming back into play, right? Before the arc even began, Oda's got Usopp talking about, like, Elbaf, onwards to... This is an exact quote. Onwards to Elbaf, onwards to my dream, right? This is before the arc starts. This is heading towards Elbaf, okay? Usopp he's gonna be the star of the show in the end. I feel like this chapter cemented it for me. Oda's not the little observation haki moment means that Oda's not forgotten about him, you know? Yeah, I think that I think we're good. I think we're good. Yeah, buy Usopp stocks. This is the perfect time to buy Usopp stocks. I think the simple fact that Oda clearly has not forgotten about Usopp, we've gotten enough little bread. Heading into the arc, Oda had Usopp reiterate this is about his dream. This is going to be important for my dream, right? Midpoint of the arc, you got Usopp, a different version of Usopp. We've never seen this version of him before, standing up against Emu. And then here, we finally get another hint, which is that observation haki is coming back for Usopp, right? 1, 2, 3. Right now, all the other Strats are getting their stuff out of the way. Usopp's is last. His is going to be the most important. I don't know. Damian Wright says, you can't do nothing the whole arc, then get a moment, say you got more focus. But how's that different than Sanji? They're all going to get their moments, right? Sanji hasn't done anything this arc either. He's getting his moment now. So how can he get... What? This logic doesn't even make sense. What the fuck? Grizzly Adams, thanks for the 5. Has anyone mentioned that Somers and likely killing him are well above Yonko 1 right now based on Somers slapping away the attack that put down King? Yeah, I think I definitely agree that that's the case. It's just, it feels so bizarre to say that they're Admiral level characters because they just don't feel like that. So I don't know how to really, yeah, I don't really know how to quantify that. Like, you could say different thing. You could say that there's a larger area between, what is it, Yonko First Mate level to Admiral level or something that we're in right now. Or maybe they are Admiral level and it has to be shown. I don't know. I don't fucking know. It feels kind of ludicrous right now. I think the current situation is obviously going to be, they're obviously up against strong opponents. I think I just personally don't enjoy in a series like One Piece seeing two characters who are much, much weaker just getting fucking like video game power up after power up to now be admiral level threats potentially. It feels dirty, if that makes sense. I guess it's supposed to feel like that. But, you know, with One Piece, with the admiral level characters, there's just a certain feel and aura to them, you know, that's just like, damn, I know they got really strong fruits, but these guys are just, it just feels like they deserve to be at the top or near the top of the One Piece world food chain, right? Sommers and Killingham are currently operating with 3 power-ups, right? In the first place, the automatic God's Knight power-up that you get, which boosts your strength, abilities, etc., gives you regeneration. So they already had that. So in the first place, God knows how... Are they... I don't even know what they're supposed to be. Are they supposed to be fucking Toby Ropo level normally? Right? Because you get the God's Knight power-up or whatever, right? Then you get the Omen power-up, which is a huge boost. Because remember, Killingham went from being fucked up by the Straw Hats off-screen with minimal difficulty, it seems like was implied, to now basically being a significant challenge for Sanji, right? So the Omen boost is huge. So that's 2 power-ups. And they get magic weapons on top of that. So it's like, this is getting crazy. This is just... What are these guys at this point, you know? I don't know if Sommers is necessarily above Yonko first mate level, because I think let's see how the fight with Zoro progresses, because I think, I feel like right now he's at least roughly Zoro, like probably a little bit above Zoro's level with King of Hell. I don't know if Zoro King of Hell is like, how close is he actually to Admiral level? I don't know. Because I kind of viewed it as, when Zoro beat King, I viewed it as Zoro's still Yonko first mate level, you know? So Sommers being a little bit stronger than Zoro here, let's see how big the gap is. I think let's get a better idea of how big the gap is. Because Sommers can block and push back Zoro's strongest attack. That doesn't mean Sommers is in a whole different tier. It might, but, you know, I want to see a little bit more. It's kind of crazy, though. Enoch1357, thanks to 2. Are you going to collab with RTTV? They invited you to their podcast. What? I didn't... What do you mean they invited me to... I don't have any invite from them, as far as I know. So, here, let me check Twitter. I feel like that... I don't know if I would like that, because it would kind of break immersion for me. Alright? So, because I've seen a lot of their episode reactions to One Piece. You know, so for me, it's kind of like... Does it... Maybe I would like it. I don't know. But I've liked seeing their reactions, you know? They're a fun group to watch reactions for. So I'm like, would I want to... I don't know about that. Would I want to break immersion? I don't know. But thanks for the heads up. Appreciate that. Yeah, good point. Venus Juro didn't push Zoro back. That's a good point. I mean, Sommers, yeah, arguably above Venus Juro right now. In which case, I would put him at Admiral level. Ender says, I don't want to have to consider them real people. No, it's more like I'm a fan, if that makes sense. I'm a fan, so I'm like... Sometimes it's more fun to just be a fan. Does that make sense? Tiptia says those guys are literally like this chat in terms of takes that they have. I don't mind. I don't go to reactors for their takes necessarily. Because I go to reactors just because I enjoy the it's more for the emotions, you know? The emotions, the surprise, and you're kind of reliving your emotions and everything like that. You know. But I don't see an invite from them for anything. So I don't really, not Twitter, nothing. So I don't know what the reference is there. I would consider it, but I don't know. Yeah. KidSmitty94, thanks for the 5. Ragnar getting translated by Chopper has insane potential for massive info dump at the end of the arc. Oh my fucking god. You are right, it has massive potential. They might as well fucking throw Robin off the ship at this point, because, like, not only can everyone and their mother read the poneglyphs, now we straight up have people from the Void Century. Like, you got Robin, like, this nerd, spending all this time learning the translations and stuff, trying to read the books and stuff, and then you got someone who's just like, hey, I was fucking there, so here's how it all played out. Here's the situation, though. It's One Piece, right? It's One Piece, which means characters don't share information. Otherwise, it breaks the plot, you know? This is fucking funny, though. This is funny. They reach to your mural video. Like a comment on the mural. I'm not going to see a comment on a video, but okay, let me check out. Let me check out just out of curiosity. SM26458, thanks for the 10. Rocks, no future sight, trash speed, limited fighting style, overly reliant on using two hands to beat even Holy Knights, whereas someone like Shanks with one arm beat Loki. How is Rocks above Kaido or Luffy? What? What do you... What? What? I don't... What? First of all, Shanks might very well turn out to be way stronger than anyone thought, right? He could... If Shanks did straight up beat Loki, Shanks isn't even... There's no point comparing Shanks to these other characters. It essentially means Shanks, in fact, surpassed Roger, the old generation, etc., and he just has been that dude for some time, and Oda's just been playing it close to his chest for a while with the character, you know? So let's leave Shanks out of this, because it's silly to... I think it's silly to use stuff like, oh, even Shanks beat Loki or stuff like that, when it's like, we've never been shown a sort of upper limit for how strong Shanks has the potential to be in this story, if that makes sense. So at this point, that doesn't really mean anything. You can't really use Shanks as the limiting factor. You can only use characters who we've seen a lot of and who we kind of know how strong they are, right? So let's remove Shanks out of the equation, right? Until we find out exactly how Shanks versus Loki went down, I don't want to make a ton of assumptions about Shanks, but I think we are now past the point where, you know, a lot of things have been made clear. Kaido was never the world's strongest creature, right? Oda's clearly comfortable going past the old generation's level of power, as we see with Loki and Emu and stuff like that now, right? So Shanks is now in this potential area along with Mihawk where it's just like, and Dragon, where it's like, Oda can do whatever we want with these characters. Saying, you know, like, to me, something like saying, oh, well, even Shanks beat Loki. It's like saying, well, even Dragon beat Loki. It's like, cool, what does that mean? We don't fucking know how strong these characters are. Maybe they're just supposed to be that strong. So how do you use them as a benchmark, right? We've never had any sort of indication that of a limit as to how strong these characters are, you know? So let's set those characters aside. As for Rocks, how do you know he has no future sight? What do you mean trash speed? I don't know what you're pulling this stuff from. Limited fighting style. Doesn't he fights the same way everybody else fucking fights. He fights like the old gen kind of just swung their weapons and shit, you know? How is his fighting style any different than Roger's fighting style? Do you have Kaido above Roger or Luffy? I don't know. I think the simple way to put it is Rocks was the captain of all the strongest pirates of the last generation, except for Roger, right? They all were under Rocks, you know? You could say that it wasn't the most, like, Rocks didn't have absolute command over them like other captains do or whatever. But I think the simplest way to put it is that he's the only dude that's even gotten this many Conqueror's Haki users to follow him. And they did ultimately follow him, you know? It was his era, the narrator establishes. He's basically implied to be the number one pirate in the world in the most stacked era of pirates, you know? So, I don't know, I don't think going off of fighting style really makes sense, because you can have a very simple fighting style like Roger, and I don't think anyone would question that Roger's like the strongest, right? I would argue Whitebeard has a simple fighting style as well, but you know, overly reliant on using two hands to beat even Holy Knights. But can't you just use two hands? I don't get it. I don't get it. Rox beats Loki? No, because that's just going against basic. That's just going against basic. Rox couldn't even beat normal Herald. Rox and normal Herald were even, and then buffed Herald and Loki are even. So how is this? There's no. That's like some ABC shit where it's like, Oda couldn't make that any clearer, you know? Rox equal to Herald, greater than Whitebeard, greater than Roger, greater than Garp. I mean, I don't think Oda's ever gonna. I mean, maybe he will at some point, but I don't know if there's supposed to be a clear hierarchy among that batch. I just kind of viewed it as Rox and Herald. Rox and Herald to date have the most impressive Conqueror's Haki Clash out of anyone, so there's something to consider there, you know? So they have the most impressive Conqueror's Haki Clash. The But I don't know if I would just go off of that to be like, oh, you know, um, that means they're the strongest. Period. I don't know. Like, I feel like Oda played it a certain way with having Roger and Whitebeard be underneath Rox at that point in time, and Garp being underneath the Rox at that point in time, because they weren't at their primes. And then I imagine, like, once they're in their primes, they're all roughly in the same group. Newx7, thanks more. This is just, I'm just seeing this. Considering becoming a serious content One Piece YouTuber, what mic and camera do you use or recommend? Use a better camera than mine. This is kind of a lazy camera. I should be using my nice Sony ZV-1 over there. You've seen it sometimes when I upgraded the look to full 4K. This is a simple, it's a Logitech Brio 4K camera, but it's not as good as the actual Sony ZV-1. I'd say if you want a webcam, that's a good webcam. Use what I've got, which is a Logitech Brio some model, just the best model you can get. Okay. And then mic, this is a Shure microphone. Before that, I used a Blue Yeti. Blue Yeti is kind of the gold standard for early stage, affordable, good YouTube mics. It's the gold standard for that. It's a little... No, there's... it's not as good as this mic I have, and if you go back to my earlier videos, you'll hear the difference. But you will, if you go and see lots of YouTubers who show their faces in videos, a lot of them are going to have a Blue Yeti. It's kind of become the simple go-to easy option for good enough quality at a good price. So I would recommend start with the Blue Yeti and then move up to something like a Shure microphone. Sorry, continuing on. Did Mort see my donation? Says Rumbleweed. Hold on. Yeah, I haven't gotten to you yet. I'm going in order. Continuing on. Magnus9450, thanks for the 5. Jinbei senses Luffy's Haki evading and folds his arm and looks east. He sees Sanji about to fight God and doesn't move a muscle. What does he even do? It is actually kind of crazy. Jinbei is... Can you guys believe at one point people were pushing for him to be the fourth... This is no joke. This was like a real discussion for some years in the community. A lot of people were like, you know what? Luffy's a Yonko now. So the new trio of commanders that he's going to have is Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei. And they've basically been demoted from the right, and like the monster trio is gone. And now it's like fucking Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei. And some people even argued Jinbei was ahead of Sanji. That was a serious discussion. That was a thing for some years. Now we're back to monster trio stuff. We understand Zoro and Sanji need a big buff to make it a real monster trio again. Because at this point in time, Jinbei is probably closer to, if I'm being fully objective, Jinbei is probably closer to Zoro and Sanji than Zoro and Sanji are to Luffy. But that's why we've got this arc that's built around reinforcing the idea of the Wings of the King monster trio will be a full-fledged dynamic again. But I like that Oda's making it clear just how much of a bum Jinbei is right now in this arc to put to bed any of those silly ideas of like Luffy's third commander and stuff like that. This isn't a fucking simple Yonko crew. This is the Pirate King's crew. Pirate King needs 2 wings. He doesn't need a Jinbei, you know? Let's get the stream lights up to 100 real quick. Rumbleweed, thanks a lot. Do you think Shanks will come? This arc is perfect. I do think Shanks is going to come. I do think Shanks is going to come. Yeah, at this point, Jinbei is closer to Franky. Okay, how do I say this? We're at a transitional stage, okay? I know I got some more supers to get through, so just give me a second. In this, we're at a transitional stage. I would say if you went, like, let's say if we went with Egghead Island, at that point in time, Luffy is so far ahead of everybody else. As long as you discount Ashura or whatever, at that point in time, Luffy's so far ahead of everybody else that Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei are closer to each other than Zoro and Sanji are to Luffy, right? I would say at that point in time, you could have made the argument that the Straw Hats are kind of like first commander, second commander, third commander. It's just weird because Zoro could basically at that point mop the floor. Like Zoro and Sanji, I would argue, are both at least first commander level, and Jinbei's arguably, to me, not quite third commander level. So there's still a gap there, but you could have made the argument that Oda's going for a 1-2-3 thing. It's just that narratively that kind of conflicts with everything Oda's presented in the story so far, right? This arc is kind of a transitional point. So everybody's getting buffs. So now Oda, it seems like he's pushing Zoro and Sanji up with big buffs. So it seems like they're going to get big buffs this arc, likely putting them a lot closer to Luffy, right? As they've been in the past. Not equal to Luffy or anything like that, just closer to the point where the trio, the main thing is in the story, the monster trio has always been well ahead of the rest of the Straw Hats, right? So I think Oda's kind of creating that separation again. You can debate whatever the gaps will be between Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, but I think once they all have mastery over Conqueror's Haki, they're going to be far ahead of the next best Straw Hats, like far ahead, right? So we're kind of at a transition point where they're getting their big buffs, Jinbei's staying stagnant, it looks like, and then other Straw Hats like Franky are now getting bigger buffs to move them ahead. Usopp probably something this arc, maybe fucking Robin or Brook, who knows, or whatever. So I think that Jinbei will be 4th or 5th strongest still by the end of this, but he's going to be in a group with Franky and stuff like that at this point, you know? Anyway. Continuing on. I do think Shanks will come this arc. I think that he's in this arc so much. This arc references him so much. He was fucking on the island like a day ago and that he left. I don't know. I don't think Jack's way above Jinbei. I think Jinbei versus Jack is like a tight fight. You argued either way. I don't know. Dr. Farewell sent Unk Alert for 440 jewels. I don't know what that means. What's an Unk Alert? I mean, I kind of get the gist, but why am I an Unk? Words and You, thanks for being a Pirate King to remember for 44 months, man. Thank you for the long time support. Yo Morge, great chapter. First time in years, I feel genuine tension outside of a flashback that someone could die in Gabon. I don't even need him to, but glad to have the feeling. This is just such a great run of chapters. I think the only thing kind of hurting it is Oda taking so many breaks. I don't say that just from a content creator's perspective, but like, literally just, if we could have back-to-back weeks of like, oh my god, last chapter Luffy got fucked up. Oh my god, this chapter, it's really driving the nail in the coffin. And juxtaposing this with Zoro also struggling against Sommers, that's something that I think most of us are also really kind of thrown by. Like, it feels good when Oda's creating a general sense of tension where everybody's kind of struggling, you know? Everybody's struggling and everybody's uncertain of how they're going to win. And then I think next chapter, assuming things probably don't go well for Gabon, it could hammer in that feeling a little bit more. I think that would be really good. Philly Zoo4 Goo, thanks for being a Pirate King Chairman for 31 months. Dread it, run from it, buy Hadruden stocks. I don't know. I think Hadruden could contribute, but I don't think he's just going to suddenly get Conqueror's Haki or anything. Maybe I'm totally wrong. This is close to what I was talking about earlier, which was that I feel like, because people are like, well, because I feel like Zoro and Sanji are going to come back, show why they're the Wings of the King, and protect Luffy, right? Once they get their big power-ups. And people were like, well, how's that going to happen while they're fucking occupied with Sommers and killing him, right? And I said that Oda can do a million things to start. Like, one, the fights have already started against Sommers and Killingham, so Oda just needs to write them getting the... Sommers and Killingham are basically characters that the moment Zoro and Sanji get their power-ups, the fight will be over, right? They're stepping stones. So, and those fights started concurrently with Luffy versus Imu, right? So they're already in motion. So Oda can end them anytime he wants, right? At the same time, all Oda has to do is... He's got so many options to slow down and give time for them to win the fights and get over, because he can throw other characters at the situation. He can throw Gaban, for example. We could get de-aged Jarl. We could get all the giants Felbaf showing up, like fucking Dory and Brogy. All flies and distractions to Imu, but distractions nonetheless. Oda can do what he can do a fucking conga line of characters at this point in time if he feels like it, you know? And he just needs one chapter of Zoro finish off Sommers, one chapter for Sanji to finish off Killingham, and then make it back. And on top of that, it's kind of clear that Imu himself is slow walking the situation with Luffy. It's not like Imu, he's kind of wanting to make it painful and take his time, you know? Which is silly because he's got a time limit, but there's other things Oda can clearly do, you know? Haven! Holy shit! Everybody, huge shout outs to Haven here. Holy fucking shit. Haven, with the best theory that I've seen. Big shout outs to Haven. Usopp gets Ragnar and freezes Luffy to keep him from bleeding out in front of Ivu. Perfect Braid Warrior of this scene, God versus God. That is, I love... I think you got it, man. I sincerely think you got it. I'm actually mind blown. I think that might be what happens. Because that's what would keep Luffy from dying, and it prevents Imu from getting to Luffy, because even Imu, it seems like, can't undo the ice. Oh my god. That solves everything. That prevents Luffy from bleeding out. One. It does everything. It gives Usopp a moment, right? Big moment. It gives him a reason to have Ragnar, right? Because Usopp's the only one that could shoot Ragnar, right? It takes advantage of Usopp's observation haki, right? It's a play on the Usopp sugar scene, where Usopp also used his sniping skills from long distance to save Luffy, right? We know Oda kind of works backwards, so he often, like, earlier scenes in the story are actually hints at what's going to happen later in the story, right? It stops Luffy's bleeding, right? And number 5, it prevents Imu from doing anything to Luffy. Because even Imu, it seemed like, couldn't undo Ragnar's ice. So it allows time to stall and for the other characters to get into the fight. That is the fucking best. That's it. I think that is what will happen. That is a great theory. It checks off so many things. TomTom saying, not saying that wouldn't be cool, but man, I just want to post-time skip Usopp fight. I don't think that's going to be Usopp's only contribution. I think that gets the ball rolling, because I think after that, Imu turns his attention towards the Straughts. I think that there's going to be attention put on Usopp after that. I don't think that's his only moment, but that is one thing that only Usopp can do, and it saves his captain. That's fucking perfect. I'm so sorry. Okay, hold on. Haven 4. Okay. I'm so sorry, man. But this might be a theory that comes out. I'm going to give you credit right away from the beginning of the video. But this is juicy stuff. This is juicy stuff. Can this go into a video? I feel like there's so much to talk about with this. I'm jotting this down. Can this go into a video? I'll give you credit right at the top. Yeah, the problem is Ragnar's size. I wonder if there's some size manipulation stuff that could come into play with Biblo. Julian Reed says, bro, he's just gonna kill Ragnar. I mean, that's like saying he's just gonna kill Gaban, or he's just gonna kill Luffy, or he's just gonna kill Zoro, or he's just gonna kill Sanji. Like, yeah, I mean, theoretically, but first of all, Ragnar is arguably the stronger than Luffy. You know, arguably stronger than Luffy. Ragnar's not just some bum. He's gonna be just fine. I think he's gonna run away. Whatever other characters can play keep away to help Ragnar. And Ragnar can also fly. Because Ragnar can fly, I wonder if it would be necessary for Usopp to shoot Ragnar. Unless Usopp shooting Ragnar is a faster way to do it. But Ragnar can fly as a hammer, so he could just go and do that. That's the one catch with the theory. Let me think about this. Biblo will make Usopp into a giant and he'll wield Ragnar. Yeah, like, I think that's... I think there's a lot here that could work. I think Usopp firing Ragnar is going to be better. Cosmofix says, More, you have to explain how you think Usopp will physically aim Ragnar. I mean, I already said that Biblo size shenanigans can come into play here, right? I think Oda set up all the pieces. Aren't these all the pieces set up? I don't know. Oda's already shown us that Imu, it seems like, can't break Ragnar's ice. We know Usopp's observation haki moments in the past have been related to sniping, like with Sugar. We know Usopp is owed a big moment this arc. At this moment in time, the only thing that could save Luffy from dying, it seems like, is if he's kept safe from Imu, just temporarily, right? And the only way to keep him safe would be that. And a size changing owl. I think there's so much shit. Okay, enough talk. I'm gonna save all my future thoughts for this theory. Haven4814, here, I'm making you a mod in the channel as well. Theory of the day. Phenomenal stuff, man. Biblo's fruit only works on objects? Maybe it can shrink Ragnar now. We don't know exactly how it works yet, right? Haven just gave you this week's video. If anything, it would be next week's video. Because this week's video, I'm sticking to Usopp. Imu would have to remove his blades, or this is useless. The blades are draining him, not his bleeding. But you could argue that Ragnar's ice just stops everything, you know? Get out all of your critiques right now. That way, in the theory, I've got, counterpoints, etc. Ragnar is an object now? Yeah, like when it's in hammer mode, it's essentially an object. BFKC111 says the blades are there to stay and will keep draining even if frozen. How do you know they keep draining even if frozen? Continuing on. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Lee Peace 4485, thanks for the 2. Would you like it if Usopp is 3/4 Lunarian? No. I think Usopp truly would benefit from just being a normal human. That's all. Although him being a Lunarian would explain why he can take so much damage and survive. Julian Reed 6030, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 8 months. Insane chapter. A couple thoughts. Yoru is the 20th blade. Everything is Mihawk upscale. I challenged you last week that Zoro and Sanji's fights wouldn't be quick nor easy. I feel like Somers proved that Imu is amazing. I think we still need to see with Zoro and Sanji's fights, because we knew from the beginning that they're not going to be able to do this without getting their Conqueror's Haki power-ups, right? My only claim is that they're not going to be as difficult as the King and Queen fights. It's more so going to be a stepping stone. They just need to get the power-ups, and then they'll win, right? So I don't think they're going to be as damaged as they were during the King and Queen fights. I think that they will have... Like, they're not going to be able to win unless they get those power-ups, which is what we're seeing right now, personally. Yoru's the 20th Blade. And Somers is proving that Imu is amazing, because, like, if Imu can essentially take bums who... Like, let's be frank. How weak are Somers and Killingham on their own? It seems like they're very weak, because Somers and Killingham on their own... I feel like so number one, they're getting the God's Knight boost in the first place. God's Knight boost gives you increased strength, speed, etc., and regeneration, right? I feel like Somers wasn't first mate level at the start of this arc. So let's say he's commander level, right? With the God, like as a God's Knight, Somers is commander level, right? Killing him is actually very hard to scale because his ability is so broken. So you could argue that from a distance, if he can create his army of monsters, killing him is just like a stupidly powerful character, right? Can conquer the entire island. Like his value is so ridiculously high. But let's say just in pure one-on-one combat, right? So Somers, I don't think Somers at the start of this arc was first mate level. I don't think anything that he did kind of showcased that, you know? I feel like if Zoro were to fight him without any of his Omen boosts or his special weapons, I think Zoro beats him somewhat comfortably, okay? So I feel like Somers is commander level just as a God's Knight, right? And then I think with Omen, that pushes him, Omen plus the special weapon, I think now he's arguably Admiral level, it's hard to say. But that suggests that Somers on his own is something like fucking... and the Omen boost is really huge, because before Omen, Killingham lost like low diff, like off-screen diff to the Strats without much. He couldn't even do anything to them, it seemed like. And now he's going toe-to-toe with Sanji. So the Omen boost is really huge. So yeah, I just feel like Somers on his own, without the weapon, without the Omen, without the God's Knight boost plus regeneration, I feel like he's arguably Tobiropo level or something. Maybe that's too harsh, but at best, commander level. You know what I mean? Like, because he's where he is now after 3 huge power-ups. It takes 3 huge power-ups for him to be a bit stronger than Zoro, from what it looks like. So it's like Imu really can buff his subordinates to insane levels. Absolutely insane levels. I don't know about Yoro being the 20th Blade, because there's no 20th Blade simply because Alabasta didn't join, right? But maybe it was the blade of the Alabasta King at the time, or Lily? That wouldn't make sense. I don't know. Enoch sent Makeup Brush for 6 jewels, thank you. Enoch sent 6-7 for 67 jewels, thank you. Enoch sent Star for 2 jewels, thank you. Thanks. Meek, thanks for the 5. Hey Morge, how's it going? Been nearly like 2 months since I've last worked on One Piece Law. How's the chapter? I love the chapter, but people are saying that the TCB scans were not that accurate with the translations of this chapter, particularly the Shanks Loki discussion. So I don't know, man. Maybe they need you back translating for TCB. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get the stream likes back up to 100. Taptia, thanks for 2. So you changed on the Shanks saving Luffy take? No, I still feel like Shanks saving Luffy would be genuinely... 2 things can be true. Would it be really cool? Yes. Would it be... I mean, I would have to see how it goes, but at this moment in time, it feels like bad writing. If Shanks has to come in to save Luffy. If it's something like, you know, I don't like this movie, but if it's something like Film Red, where Shanks arrives and he and Luffy in tandem are able to help take down the Demon, like, you know, similar to in the movie, take down the Demon King, or drive back Imu in this situation, I think that's great. But Shanks saving Luffy, it feels so fundamentally against the whole point of Shanks and Luffy's relationship and what Luffy told him, his parting words, and like in the first chapter, Shanks's parting words to Luffy and Marineford. All of Shanks's dialogue so far has basically been like he wants to meet Luffy when Luffy is a man who no longer needs to be saved, when he's no longer that little kid, when he's now an equal to Shanks, you know? So I feel like the only way I think it would be cool if Shanks saved Luffy is if two things happen, right? So let's say Shanks comes in, saves Luffy, and then immediately after that, Luffy gets up with some sort of awakening or something like that, hockey, whatever, and then in turn, he's the one who gets to drive back Emu, because it's all like the trend so far has been Shanks does not want to meet Luffy when Luffy is at a low point and needs to be saved. Shanks wants to meet Luffy as equals, you know? So I think that's basically, I don't know. Random N1M says Oda already ruined Shanks' relationship with Luffy by saving him from Aramaki instead of Luffy handling it himself. No, to me, that was like the final transition point. So if you look at the evolution, right? Evolution is basically first chapter, Shanks gives up his arm to save Luffy, right? Shanks comes in, saves Luffy, gives up his arm. He bets his arm on the next generation. He bets his arm on Luffy, right? So Luffy's this little kid that needs to be saved. Luffy basically ends by making this promise like, I'm going to surpass you, my crew's going to surpass you, I'm going to be the king of the pirates, etc. Right? And Shanks gives his hat. He's like, return it to me once you've become a great pirate. Shanks coming across Luffy in this state, fucking skewered shish kebab, bleeding out to death. Is that Shanks meeting Luffy when he's looking like a great pirate? I mean, he's technically a great pirate, he's a Yonko, but emotionally, is that the moment that Luffy can feel proud handing the hat back to Shanks? I don't think so. And that's supported by what we saw at Marineford, right? Shanks saves Luffy chapter 1. Shanks saves Luffy again at Marineford. And Shanks is like, I don't think it'd be right for me to see Luffy in this state right now because that would be breaking the promise, right? This is Luffy completely broken, defeated, in shambles. I had to save him again. That's not how we promised to meet again, right? Even if that's not in the exact text of what Luffy told Shanks about how they're going to meet, it's the symbolic idea of it, right? There's not much difference between Shanks saving Luffy and reuniting with him right here versus at Marineford. They're in the same exact situation, right? Bailing him out yet again when Luffy completely lost and couldn't do jack shit, right? Then we progress to the New World, right? So Shanks saved Luffy at Marineford, saw Luffy at his lowest state. He's like, he's still not ready, but I still believe in him, right? Then the next time Shanks is talking about reuniting with Luffy is post Whole Cake Island. Now Luffy's being called an emperor. Shanks likely knows that Luffy's not yet actually at that level. It seems like he kind of is aware, but he comments that, you know, the time for us to meet is coming, right? So the time that we can stand as equals and see eye to eye, and you can give me back the hat, that's coming, right? So Shanks, he's kind of tracking Luffy's progress like that. And then Wano, Shanks didn't have to save Luffy. That's the thing. He didn't have to save Luffy. Luffy was going to be just fine. I think Wano was like, it's such a natural sort of progression, which is like, first I save you as a child, meet me when you're a grown up and we're equals. Marineford, you're not there yet, kid. Let's not meet just yet. I'll bail you out again, right? Then post Whole Cake Island, Shanks is tracking Luffy. He's like, he's getting there. You know, he got back up from Marineford. He's on his way. He's getting there. This is cool, right? And then post Wano, at this point, Shanks kind of knows what Luffy's done. For whatever reason, Shanks doesn't feel like it's quite ready to meet him again yet. Green Bull is there. Shanks probably knows that Luffy can handle Green Bull at this point. Like, Shanks is there. He's proud. He's just giving a helping hand, because why not? I think that's the cool thing about that reunion. It wasn't a reunion, but it was a close call, which is Luffy no longer needs to be saved. He no longer needs to be saved. Shanks knows how strong Luffy is. The big tip-off is Shanks saying that I think it's time for us to go after the One Piece. That doesn't directly reference Luffy, but it's Shanks seeing Luffy is now a Yonko. He's now done all of this stuff, 3 billion berry bounty. Shanks is like, okay, something shifted. Let's go after the One Piece. Green Bull is there, and in the past, Luffy would have had to be saved from Green Bull. But we can see Luffy sitting there with his squad around him, nonplussed, perfectly relaxed. He can handle Green Bull if it comes to it. Shanks just gives him like a sort of parting gift. In that situation, it was finally like Shanks doesn't need to save Luffy anymore. He can basically, he's like, we're almost ready to meet each other. I think that meeting is around the corner. You don't need to be saved anymore. But here's like a little parting gift on the way out. It's kind of like, to me, it was the equivalent of like when Luffy was leaving Dressrosa and all those ships were coming at Luffy, angry from other nations and stuff like that, like trying to go after Luffy for the Doflamingo thing. And yeah, Luffy and his fleet could have handled them fine, but Fujitora gives them a little parting gift. He's like, here's a gift on the way out, and he just wipes out the fleet by himself, you know? That's what that felt like. So it wasn't a reunion, but it was kind of from a distance, it was just a sort of, okay, the stage has been set for them to finally meet again. When they finally meet again, so you can kind of see that arc trajectory, right? If when they finally meet again, it's like this, when Luffy's skewered, shish kebab, broken like Marineford, and then Shanks has to bail him out yet again, it's like all of this sort of progress in their beautiful arc, right? This long-running relationship is rewound 700 chapters or whatever the math is, back to fucking Marineford, and it's like, okay, is Luffy gonna like fucking be bleeding out and handing Shanks the hat back? He's like, did that make you proud? And Shanks is like, there's fucking blood on my hat. Thanks. Like, what the? I don't know. I think if we're heading towards a film Red type scenario, I think that's cool. Or again, alternatively, Shanks comes in to save Luffy, and then Luffy has to awaken or whatever to help out Shanks. I think that would be cool as well, right? If Luffy gets his bloom, whatever he's set to get, right after Shanks is seen, that's good. You know, if Luffy can essentially show his strength in kind right after Shanks does. But if the arc simply ends with Luffy bloodied, defeated, broken, Shanks had to come bail him out again, I don't want to see Luffy like going like, here's the hat, Shanks. Am I a big boy now? Like, what the fuck? Anyway. Continuing on. Random N1 says, makes no sense. If he no longer needs to be saved, he shouldn't have interfered. In fact, Shanks imagined Luffy as a helpless child who was crying when getting mad at Aramaki. You are contradicting. Shanks was reading the newspaper about how the whole crew was celebrating what Luffy's become now, right? I think there's a difference between, saving. I don't think Shanks was saving Luffy right then in his mind, but it was just giving him a hand, because he knows that from the papers, according to the fucking papers, Luffy's the man that took out Kaido, right? Shanks is probably just aware that they're fucking recovering at this point, you know? It's the same way that post any arc, whatever it may be, Enies Lobby, Dressrosa, yada yada, the Straw Hats are generally in a very vulnerable spot. With Luffy, with those injuries at that point, it's possible he needed to be saved as well. But at that point, it seemed like, if anything, Shanks was very proud of Luffy at that moment. And he didn't want Green Bull going and trying to scavenge and be a vulture at a point when they're all coming off of this really big war, you know? Anyway, continuing on. I think it's impossible to read that whole scene and think that Shanks is actually looking down on Luffy still, you know? That whole scene was him being very proud of Luffy and basically acknowledging that, okay, things of Luffy's come to the top of the pirate food chain, and he's actually a contender for One Piece, so now I'm going after the One Piece as well. Like, straight up, Shanks saying it's time to go after the One Piece is Shanks saying, I'm going to compete with Luffy. That's literally the meaning behind it. I'm going to compete with Luffy. That's basically what that means. Elijah Petty, thanks for the 2. If you're Emu, is it worth it to Dami Reversi Gaban? Oh shit, that's a good question. Can Emu Dami Reversi in this form? I don't know if Emu can Dami Reversi in this form. You know, I don't think that's been fully established. I feel like, right, he hasn't Dami Reversi'd anyone in this form as far as we can tell. I think it's worth it to Dami Reversi Gaban, because why not? Gaban's strong still. And I wonder if it would put Gaban's health back in its prime or anything. I don't know if it does that. I feel like the contracts probably get you back to your prime, but yeah, I don't know. If I were Emu, is it worth Dami reversing Gaban? Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if Emu can. You know, I think it's worth it to do it, but I don't know if Emu can in this form. Charitard91, thanks for the 10. The leaks mention Zoro fighting Somers with a sword and Sanji fighting Killing Him, who has a spear, noting that the image of Nika with the sword and spear is symbolic with the wings of the Pirate King. Yeah, and I think that goes back to, obviously, the image that we've recently seen of Nika having both. I think that's a really cool idea. I like that symbolism for sure. I've low-key liked the idea of Sanji representing the shield, because I don't think I've thought of Sanji as a spear. I mean, Sanji could be a spear. Like, Sanji, spear, what does a spear symbolize? Quick, fast attacks. That's Sanji, right? Empty Mind 3875, thanks for 2. What if by, and sorry, to clarify, we've seen Nika images of holding a sword and a shield, and a sword and a spear, so I feel like Oda could have played it either way with that. Empty Mind, thanks for the 2. What if by Blackbeard stealing Emu's Devil Fruit, he controls the Holy Knights? I don't know anymore if Blackbeard's going to steal Emu's Devil Fruit. I don't know. I wonder if there's something else that can happen there. Controlling the Holy Knights. That would be interesting if they're just if the contracts just automatically transfer over. That'd be wild. I don't know if it would work like that. Justin, thanks for the 5. If Big Mom somehow comes back to face Luffy when compared to Emu, she's just an old hag to him. I feel that this defeat is the birth of Pirate King Luffy. Yeah, I think the Luffy that comes back from this is going to be close to our fully realized strongest version of Luffy for end of story. This feels like the defeat to trigger that. I remember we used to talk about earlier, like, what happens if Big Mom comes to Elbaf and everything. This was a discussion even throughout the arc. I think at this point, there's just no purpose to that. She's just so she's not in this league anymore, you know? Meek6173, thanks to 2. How would Usopp wield Ragnar just logistically? I think Biblo shenanigans at this point. I think we would need some elaboration on what Biblo can do. Empty Mind 3875, thanks to 5. Oda has no excuses not to kill Gaban. He's the perfect character to do it. Also, did you see YouTubers RTTV reacted to your One Piece history video? Oh shit! Oh, I didn't know they reacted. I thought it was a comment. Oh, that's fun. That's actually really fun. Let me see that. That just happened? Oh, this was 3 days ago. That's cool. That's really cool. I might watch that at some point. That's funny. We talked about that a little bit earlier in this stream, but I didn't realize that. That is the context in which they were saying that they were considering having me on their podcast. I thought people were saying that they had messaged me or something, and I didn't respond. I was like, I haven't seen a message, so that's cool. I will check that out later. Julian Reed, thanks for the 2. Is Zoro gonna get any of these 19 blades? I like to think no. I like the blades Zoro's got right now, because Enma, he worked too hard to get that. Right? There's too much storytelling behind that, in my opinion, for Zoro to drop that. Then Wado Ichimonji, obviously non-negotiable. Got to keep that one. And then Kitetsu, I feel like it's almost embarrassing to be a swordsman of Zoro's level contending for world's strongest swordsman, and then Kitetsu is one of your strongest, like one of your 3 swords. But it just means so much to Zoro, I think, at this point. I would be really heartbroken if he had to swap out Kitetsu or anything like that, you know? I don't want Zoro to get any of these. And these seem like magic swords, too. Like, blatantly magic swords, so I don't know. Meek, thanks for the 5. Where's the Nefertari weapon/blade? Might Vivi use it in the final war? If it's on the same level as these other weapons, then it might be insane. So somebody mentioned a little bit earlier that it could be fucking Yoru, you know? But, I don't know. I'm still fucking confused about the whole concept of the blades having special powers, because I'm just like, are they devil fruit blades, or what are they? You know? That's like, why do they have special abilities? Why are they strong? I'm curious, but it's really cool that they've all got their own thing. Tom, thanks for the 5. Few things. These weapons could buff the Blackbeard crew. Maybe the weapons have personas and act as enemies in Final War. Is the shotgun one of them? Yeah, the shotgun being one of them that's a really curious possibility now, right? So one of them was a sniper. Yeah, the weapons buffing. like, now we do have the option, right? If the Blackbeard Pirates do get, if Blackbeard does get Emu's abilities, he can do so many buffs to subordinates now. It's kind of crazy because the God's Knights buff is in itself a huge buff, increased strength plus regeneration. Omen, it seems like a massive stats buff, and then the weapons are just the cherry on top. I would just, to me, this is like, now it's heading into personal preference territory, right? I would just fucking hate it if the entire final villain squad is just characters that are weak, that have just been buffed to be strong and capable. I would not enjoy that. I personally have always enjoyed One Piece villain groups that can stand on their own, where I'm like, shit, CP9, that squad was just strong. Like, it felt like the Strats were going up against killers, right? Baroque works, right? Like, some of those final fight, like when Zoro's going up against Mr. One, it feels like, holy shit, this dude's a fucking monster that Zoro's going up against. How does Zoro beat this dude, right? I think the sort of sniveling, weak, cowardly Sommers, killing him types, I think it's cool for this arc because I don't think they're ultimately going to be the focus. The whole spotlight's on Emu, right? So I think seeing some weak characters getting big buffs is fun in certain contexts. I wouldn't enjoy the feeling of, Zoro and Sanji's final opponents, the Straw Hats' final opponents being basically essentially a fodder squad that are way weaker than the Straw Hats, but they've just been buffed artificially to be a problem, I think I just wouldn't enjoy that. I'm not saying it won't happen. Tom, also another question. There's a tier list I want to do for Monday's stream. Would you have time this weekend to be able to do it and assemble it? If you do, I'll just hit you on Twitter for what it is. If you don't have time, no worries. Tier Visa, thanks for 2. Dami Reversi clearly depends on character/personality. I have some thoughts on that. You'll see me talk about it, not in this week's video, but the following week's video. I do feel like that's a big part of it. It does make me wonder with Shuri, though, because Shuri, how do I say? Oh, you got time, man? Okay, awesome. I will message you about it shortly. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Everybody shouts in the chat to TomTom for helping out with making tier lists and stuff for us in advance. Omen Mars is a good Sanji opponent. Yeah, Gorosei with Omen. The Gorosei with Omen are going to be some fucking monsters. Like, that is a squad. Because the sense I've gotten is the Gorosei, as they are essentially Admiral-esque characters in terms of threat. You've got a wide range with them. So, Saturn always all the way at the bottom, and then Warcry is actually like a threat on his own at the top. So you've got a good range with the Gorosei, and Omen buffing them. That would be really cool. That'd be really cool. Fucking Shamrock with Omen. Yeah, it's just there's so many possibilities here. I think Omen's a good way to do the buffs for them, but I wouldn't want this. I don't know. There's so much here. There's just so much here in terms of potential for the way things can go. Jotar sent loot box for 1,000 jewels. Hydrogen sent star for 2 jewels. Yeah, Dami Reversi working on Shuri actually hurt some of my beliefs surrounding Dami Reversi. But I think thinking about it a little bit more, I think it still works. So just wait for my video on how Emu's powers, sort of Maki and everything work. Dare Boppler, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 19 months. If you give Zoro and each one of his swords a Devil Fruit, can he be on Emu's level? Also, do you think God tier is a whole tier above Pirate King? No, I don't think Zoro and each one of his swords being a Devil Fruit can be on Emu's level, because I just think there's a hard limit to what Devil Fruit power can do. So put it this way, Loki was doing attacks with 2 of the most powerful fruits in existence, right? Which was the Nidhogg fruit, which has to date the largest, like the greatest destructive power of any fruit that we've seen. Maybe the Gurugurunami, depending what you want to argue or whatever. But the Nidhogg fruit, the greatest destructive power that we've seen. And then Ragnar, right? Which is the strongest freezing abilities that we've seen, right? Both of those attacks could be easily stopped by Emu's Maki. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, I would argue that Loki is an example of a character who already has two of the strongest fruits in existence, right? Um, and even if you remove the fruits, Loki is a good deal stronger than Zoro. Just base Loki is crazy strong, right? Arguably Yonko level or above, however you view him, right? Just base Loki is crazy strong, right? So that kind of just answers the question, right? Which is that even with a Yonko-esque level character with two of the strongest Yonko level or stronger level character with two of the strongest fruits in existence, right? It's technically it's not two weapons, he's not dual wielding hammers, but he's essentially using two of the strongest fruits in existence. Even that guy can't get past Imu's defenses. So I think Zoro needs way more than just some fruits to be able to take down Imu. Haki is ultimately going to be the thing. Zoro needs to get his Haki up, you know? I think God tier is a whole tier above Pirate King. Definitely. Like, we've already seen stuff like even just taking Rocks, who is, I guess you could say, a Pirate King level character, however you want to argue it, right? Rocks, right? If you Dami Reversi Rocks, then you've got the first character in the story who can do a solo Sky Split. So right there, Oda's got a character who's just on a totally different level than Pirate King level, right? Even Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, etc., none of them are splitting the sky by themselves. So you've already got characters like Dami Rocks, what is it? God's Knight Herald. These are characters who should be at least Pirate King level, if not above. And Imu is definitively stronger than those characters. So whatever Imu's tier is, you can call it whatever you want, God tier, whatever. It is at least a tier or two above the likes of Roger, you know? Taptio Treviso, thanks for the 2. Would that be fine for the Weakling Trio's Blackbeard fight? I think yeah. I think I've always argued that the Weakling Trio could just fight Blackbeard pirates in general, and like some of the lower level Straw Hats could fight Blackbeard pirates in general. I think the Seraphim fighting the main Straw Hats would be better. But, you know, now with all of these potential buffs, I have question marks of if Blackbeard's even going to get Imu's fruit or what it's going to be. I don't know. If there's a different fruit in mind for him, because now there's other options like the Earth God fruit, stuff like that, you know? Anshuman Acharya, thanks for the 5. Making God's Knights and Omens seem like it affects the Devil Fruit user. Blackbeard character doesn't match that ability. He's too selfish. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, you kind of have to give something to give these characters powers. But the thing is, Imu's also very selfish, so he might just view it as, you know, I like, you kind of just gotta to keep your hands clean. I mean, with Imu, the tricky thing is that Imu is very selfish, but he values things like, it could be a fundamental, you know what? Now you got me thinking about it symbolically a little bit, right? So, like, let's think about Imu and Blackbeard as contrasting villains, right? So, this is not to rule things out. This is just a bit of analysis, right? So, Imu is a character who, obviously, also very selfish and power hungry. He wants everything for himself, right? The world to be the way he is, the way he wants. But there's a few things about Imu that are interesting, which is that Imu kind of doesn't like doing things himself at all. He would much rather his subordinates do it. Like, Imu really does not like getting his hands dirty. That's why he's got so many characters that he binds to him as loyal servants, right? And Imu kind of demands absolute servitude, right? So Imu is all about control, right? So it's two different types of characters. Imu's all about control. He wants characters who work exclusively for him, who are bound to him, who he can kill with a single thought if needed. Absolute servants, absolute slaves, essentially, right? And he grants them power to do his bidding. Blackbeard's a character who kind of, he's down to rough it. You know what I mean? Like, he is a character who will get his own hands dirty, you know? Like, that's been his whole story. He's kind of just, he's been in the fields, you know? Like, he's been doing stuff. He's been willing to get his hands dirty, right? And he'll do all of the stuff that needs to be done himself. He's not as much, like, now he's a Yonko, so he's cool with sending characters out and stuff like that, but throughout the story, he's been a more hands-on character. And then on top of that, his dynamic with his subordinates is very different in that Imu demands, like, absolute control and servitude. Like, he does not want any semblance of dissent or or betrayal among his subordinates, right? Blackbeard's whole operation has always been about emphasizing maximum freedom for his subordinates. He's even telling Aokiji, like, hey, you can, like, all of us in the Blackbeard Pirates, we're in it for ourselves. Like, we're in it for our own agendas, our own ambitions, yada yada. We're kind of all using this squad to just further our own goals. Aokiji, you can join, and I don't even care if you're not that loyal, as long as, we're all we play on the same team. So it's a very interesting, different approach. Blackbeard on the far end with, like, free-spirited, anything goes, similar to the Rocks Pirates, right? Similar to his dad. And then Imu all the way on the other end, which is more like everything needs to be in the palm of my hand. I need absolute control. Everyone's my puppets, yada yada. Yeah, I like that. There's so many cool things in One Piece if you just, so many cool ways Oda thinks about these character concepts that, just come out in different ways. That also makes me question, let's say Blackbeard did steal Imu's abilities. Is it part of his MO to turn all of his support? I mean, I guess if he could make them all slaves, with the contracts and stuff, and make them more powerful, it would behoove him to do so. There's no reason not to. But I wonder conceptually if Oda isn't going to go there. I don't know. Haven4814, again, shouts for the theory of the week, theory of the month, I don't know. Speaking of Shamrock, do you think him having an actual Cerberus sword means Shanks' Griffin actually has the fruit now? I don't think so, because I just don't know what the fuck the point of a Griffin fruit would be. Frankly, I don't know what the fuck the powers of the Cerberus sword even are. I guess it depends on what Oda says a Cerberus can do in One Piece. But, like, a Griffin doesn't even, in mythology, a Griffin's kind of just like, they don't have special powers the way that a phoenix or a dragon, etc. would. So I don't really know what Shanks' sword being a Griffin would really do. I also kind of prefer Shanks just being a hockey man, as they say, just have hockey. Tiptio thanks to 2. Funny Luffy fans think Imu wasn't trying versus Loki. I think that is, like, insane cope. I think blatantly just reading the fight, Imu did way more against Loki than he did against Imu. He essentially toyed with Luffy, He toyed with Luffy. He never had to actually pull out Maki to even block Luffy's attacks. Imu's, like, if we're being blunt, Imu's fight with Loki was actually a fight with lots of clashes and such. And Imu having to pull out big named moves for a lot of things, It still wasn't that hard for Imu, but at the same time, Loki was at his absolute worst health-wise, right? Near death, right? And then Imu fighting a fully fresh, like, this was Luffy at his literal peak. Luffy's actually never been better than what we had just now. It wasn't really a fight. It was Luffy running for most of it, right? Luffy running for most of it. The few times that he was able to try and get in attacks on Imu, Imu blocked it with the same ease he would block Zoro and Sanji's attacks, Frankly, yeah, in terms of what Luffy showed in terms of his ability to do anything to Imu, I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty much nothing. I don't know why Here's the thing. So let me just explain this. It's not even just Luffy fans, so you have to remember, even though there's, like, a blatant, like, I think Oda couldn't be any more blatant about the gap he's trying to show between Luffy and Loki, because not only in terms of Loki actually having to do, Imu having to do so much more against Loki, whereas Imu having zero difficulty dealing with any of Luffy's shit, right? Despite that gap, like, you can compare it any way you want. Like, the attacks that were used, the effort that was put in, the length of the fight, the scale of the fight, yada yada. All of those metrics, it's obvious that Imu versus Loki was more of a fight. The kicker on top of that is that Oda really, really played up that Loki is fucking a shell of his normal self. He's nowhere close to his true strength, right? Whereas Oda made a big deal about, like, Luffy is at his absolute best right here, right? So you would have to really, really hardcore ignore any semblance of author intent to argue that Oda's trying to show that, like, to even argue that Oda's trying to show that injured Loki and healthy Luffy are about even would be an extreme stretch that's based on nothing, right? But then to argue that Luffy is just straight up stronger than Loki overall is fucking insane, right? Now, the reason that there's been so much pushing for this. Like, you see a good number of Luffy fans trying to defend and argue stuff like Imu wasn't trying against Loki, yada yada. Is this? It's not even about the Luffy agenda. It really is about agenda in general, but it's not even about Luffy agenda. There are so many agendas riding on. Think about it like this. There are so many agendas riding on claiming that Luffy did even moderately relative to Loki's performance against Imu. Because it's not just the Luffy agenda, okay? You can be a big Luffy fan and be rooting for Luffy, right? And you want to argue that, Luffy's still close to Loki, equal to Loki, stronger than Loki, whatever. But it's not just the Luffy agenda. It's everything that agenda represents, which is also the Kaido agenda is riding on this. The Admiral's agenda is riding on this, right? Because Luffy doesn't just represent himself. Luffy showing against Imu is basically a representation of Kaido. It's a representation of Kizaru and the Admirals by extension, right? If you're a Kaido fan and you want to keep arguing Kaido, world's strongest creature, yada yada, then Luffy getting absolutely shit-stomped by Imu immediately, right? With zero difficulty, and significantly less difficulty than against Loki, is a really bad look for Kaido, right? Because, Kaido, Luffy, however you want to argue, it's not like Kaido was, like, just way above Luffy. Gear 5 Kaido versus Luffy was, like, it was a pretty relative fight, right? However you want to scale it, it was somewhat relative, right? So, Luffy being embarrassed by Imu that badly and looking that much worse than Loki basically kind of kills the whole Kaido top of the mountain world's strongest creature thing, right? Because Kaido fans can kind of excuse Imu. They'll be like, well, Imu just doesn't count as the world's strongest creature thing. But now they can no longer argue against Kaido being stronger than Loki, right? And that also just opens the floodgates to Kaido's just world's strongest creature thing being a rumor in general, right? So Kaido fans, they've got a lot of stake in terms of the argument that Luffy did better than Loki against Imu. Because that's a set, like, however you view Luffy doing against Imu, that's a reflection, right, of how Kaido would do, right? And it just makes it seem like Kaido is way weaker than Loki, okay? Even if you think Kaido would have done a bit better than Luffy against Imu, it seems like a long gap, like a large gap between even healthy Luffy and, like, half-dead Loki. So, Kaido agenda is riding on the whole Luffy situation. And then Kizaru, the Admiral agenda, because I think Admirals fought tooth and nail in Egghead Island. We got the fights between Luffy and Kizaru. There was some gray area, like Luffy got the better of Kizaru both times, but there's a gray area in there that Kizaru was not in his full right mind. His full heart wasn't in it. He even helped give Luffy food, right? So Admirals have something to work with from that whole Egghead Island scenario, right? And Admirals are invested in always arguing that Admirals are basically competitive with anybody in the verse. If you're an Admiral fan, again, this kind of tanks that whole thing because Luffy doing so poorly against Imu in comparison to Loki just suggests further that there are gaps and the Admirals aren't really on characters like the top tiers of the world, right? So it's a lot of different agendas that are right. It's essentially anybody that you see arguing that Luffy did well against did well against Imu comparative to Loki, right? It's not even just necessarily a Luffy agenda that's going into that. There are multiple other agendas. There's the Yonko agenda riding on that, like the Kaido, Big Mom, etc. And there's the Admiral agenda riding on that. Because those fans, and there's a lot of those fans, need Luffy to have done better than Loki in order to keep arguing that Loki hasn't just fucking surpassed all of them clearly, So just keep that in mind. I think, if anything, the fact that at least the majority of people acknowledge that Loki did better than Luffy is a huge win, because there is so much agenda from various fandoms that are riding on the argument that Luffy did better. And Loki's a brand new character with basically a zero fan base, right? Like, the fan base for Loki is just starting. So the fact that even despite so much bias that's likely already built in favor of Luffy compared to Loki, the fact that still most people can acknowledge that Loki did better, it says a lot. Does that make sense? Anyway. Continuing on. Random N1M says, Gaban will upscale Admirals massively if he does better than Loki and Luffy. Again, if Gaban does better than Loki and Luffy, they'll be crazy. That'll be huge. But you gotta remember, we've already got direct scaling between Gaban and Loki. we already saw one, Gaban's made clear that he thinks that Loki's a lot stronger than him. He said so as much in his first meeting with Luffy. But two, Gaban literally fought against the same opponent as Loki. He fought against God's Knight Herald alongside Shanks and all of Elbaf's army. And he was like, I don't think anybody can beat this dude. And then Loki comes along and basically is equal to God's Knight Herald by himself. Gaban's even talking about that after that whole scenario. Is like, I didn't think anybody, like, Gaban basically has been pretty much side by side been shown to not be anywhere remotely close to Loki, and that was a much younger version of Gaban, right? So a much stronger version of Gaban. I think Gaban will do some stuff right now, but I don't think it's going to last too long, however well he does. I don't know. Yeah, pretty, like, put it this way, Gaban Loki implying Loki greater than Roger. Gaban already said that. Gaban literally said in after the Herald fight, he was just like, I could not imagine anybody stopping him, and he literally says that if Herald had gotten out into the rest of the world, he would have probably just destroyed the rest of the world, and he didn't believe there was anyone that could stop him. And this was back when Whitebeard was young. Like, this was like Gaban's acknowledging Prime Whitebeard, Kaido's around there, Big Moms, etc. Right? Like, Gaban's basically just like, this is not anything I've seen before. So it's already written in point blank that Gaban views Loki as above those guys. So, you know, let's see how Oda does it next chapter, but I guess we just got to see. Tornado says, I do think Herald let Loki win, though. He did at the end. But Loki was going toe-to-toe. Well, Loki actually looked like he was beating up Herald even before then. Then Herald got his wits about him for 1 second, like 30 seconds or whatever, and allowed Loki to land a big hit that was essentially the finisher that finished him off. But it was already shown that Loki by himself is at least capable of going toe-to-toe with Dami Herald, you know? The guards were beating Herald, though. Herald was tanking through everything, and no, it's how I don't know how people could read this shit and like, no, it's actually outright explained to us that Gaban, like near Prime Gaban, near Prime Shanks, and all of Elbaf's strongest warriors together, it's outright told to us, like it's explained word for word, they could not do jack shit against Herald. And they were pretty sure that basically the world comes to an end if Herald exits this castle, right? There's no room for interpretation. I think I dislike when people are like trying to go against author's intent. When the author is telling you how you're supposed to perceive the scene, just take that as, take that as it is. Let's get stream likes up to 150 real quick. All right, continuing on. Charizard91, thanks for the 10. Why wouldn't all three turn into Black Blades? They all represent something about him. Watto is his dream, Sandai is his curse/burden for crew, Enma is his commitment to Luffy being Pirate King. I think that you could, I think some of those meanings are like a little bit, I don't know if I don't know if you asked Oda point blank what each sword represents, Oda would say those things necessarily. But I would agree that all of those swords are very important to him and his journey for sure. What I would say is that I've always imagined it as like when Zoro finishes his big fight against Mihawk to become the world's strongest swordsman, the fight ends and all of his swords stay black. So I view it as kind of, that would be the final duel that does it. So I view it as all swords turning black. I'm sorry if, did I say something to the contrary of that earlier in the stream? I think I've always been on board with that. Random guy JV8CJ, thanks for the 5. Notice that Killingham's Zoan clouds turn black like the Gorosei after gaining Omen. It's possible that the Gorosei are always in Omen state by default. Ooh, what the hell? That's an interesting point. Oh, shit. Saturn was that bad with an Omen? That is wild. That is a great theory, random guy. I would prefer that. It just keeps things, it makes things make more sense and feel consistent in my mind. Because the Gorse getting an Omen on top of what they are right now, that's kind of wild. Let me think. Who else had black clouds? So didn't Lucci have black clouds? So it's not like a default thing. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I don't know how much it indicates, but that is an interesting point. Honk Shoe, me. Thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for a month. I hope you've been enjoying it. Hey Morge, amazing chapter. Have you heard that the emu is Joy Boy's parrot theory? It actually has a lot of evidence and would be so cool and would be very One Piece. I have. I actually read through the theory. I think it makes sense. I talked about it earlier on stream. It's one of those where it could totally be true. I have no thoughts about it till we get a little bit further. I would say I think I prefer emu genuinely being a dude, I think, rather than a parrot. But it would fit One Piece stuff. I went back and looked at sizes and stuff. So it looked like when emu arrived at Elbaf, his size relative to the Pentagon. Let me double check it. Maybe I'm misremembering it. So it would be what, chapter 1179? By the way, guys, with this chapter, Elbaf is on its way to be it for me, it's like close to a what do you call? For me, it's arguably like I've definitely got it at a 9 right now, and I feel like it could end up being just a 10 out of 10 for me by the end of it. I've only got 2 storylines in One Piece that I call 10 out of 10s, and that's Water 7 Enies Lobby and Marineford. Or I guess Sabaody as well, so 3. So 3 storylines I've got it as a 10 out of 10. For me, Elbaf is definitely at a 9 right now. Anything could happen, but it's easily a 9. This is... I'm so sad because it's giving me everything I wanted from Wano just a little bit later. And I'm like, why couldn't Wano have... enough talking about Wano. Let me look at emu relative to the size of the pentagrams. I feel like he looks small in the pentagram that he arrives in. He does look really small in the pentagram that he arrives in. Looks really small. Man, this is a fucking... I could see the parrot theory. I definitely could see the parrot theory. I think that would be cool. I do think it would be cool. It would be really wild. So we know that there's a character called Saint Emu Nerona, right? And that person presumably wasn't a parrot. But let's pretend we go down this route of the parrot eating a devil fruit. The parrot eats a devil fruit, gains the ability... Let's say it's the Sea Devil Fruit. That's what allows Emu to transform into this form, right? So it allows him to transform into this form that, that we see him in now. If that's the case, then maybe Emu in that form took over some kingdom, declared himself Saint Emu Nerona or whatever, and then from there he, led the whole thing against Joy Boy or yada yada. I could see the parrot thing. I guess it's one of those where it's like, it could fit, and there's nothing to disprove it. I just don't feel strongly either way. The beauty of editing says, oh my god, man, it feels so good watching Luffy struggle. I think the thing that people have always missed when I talk about Luffy struggling, because they're like, well, he lost to Kaido so many times, right? He did. My thing is that we never got to see his character experience that struggle, okay? In the sense that with Luffy's losses against Kaido, they were all very immediate. So he's knocked out and gets back up each time. So it's almost like we skipped the part where we actually see Luffy having to cope with his own weakness, right? That's why I love the Crocodile loss the first time, because Luffy is reduced to begging Crocodile to stop the sandstorm to Yuba, right? He's begging, like, he's not saying please, but like, stop it, stop. He's like yelling, he's helpless, we don't normally see Luffy like that. He becomes desperate. Then Crocodile stabs him, and then we see this, like, we see the shock on Luffy's face. We see the realization, sort of, and he kind of has to suffer through it for a little bit, basically, right? And then the whole situation with Emu is basically an elaborated version of that, right? You go back to Sabaody and Marineford losses, like, oh my god, those absolutely were brutal for Luffy because we saw him have to sit with the pain of defeat. I'm not saying that this is going to become as bad as those, because those were absolutely crushing, but that's something that always felt like it was missing for me in Wano, which is like something that feels like it's affecting him. Like, not just like, oh, I had to take a nap several times, right? Something that feels like it's affecting him. And I always say that what I enjoyed in the Luffy Kaido fight, Gear 5th was really cool and everything. I love that section. But the one part of the arc, of the entire, out of all of his rounds against Kaido, that felt like the type of desperation and emotionally, like seeing Luffy emotionally affected, was one chapter, and that was chapter 1042. That's when Luffy's fighting Kaido in Gear 4th. It's like a switch goes on, and finally Luffy's no longer like, oh, I'm having fun, ha, he, he. He's actually desperate. He's actually emotionally, like, he's desperate to defeat Kaido. He's not having fun anymore. Things are serious. He is having to fight tooth and nail against an opponent that is stronger than him. I like seeing Luffy having to struggle through that. And then he's knocked out, and then he wakes up and it's back to fun and games. So I'm not saying that I dislike... I can appreciate all the losses to Kaido for what they were, right? But they skip the section of the loss that's actually meaningful. Like, the reason losses have meaning is when the hero actually has to suffer for them, right? When the hero actually has to suffer. That's when losses have meaning. If it's just a go sleep, wake back up sort of cycle, it's just checking off a box. Does that make sense? Anyway. Hold on. Continuing on. 1 second. All right. Obsidian Angel, thanks for the 10. I think we should get ready for a dissatisfying ending where Imu can no longer sustain himself outside Pangaea and leave soon. I still strongly believe that we're set for a rallying moment for the situation, because I think even the simple fact that Gaban is showing up to help Luffy, right, to me suggests that, because if Oda was gonna do that, then why not just end it with Imu having defeated Luffy, and then right before, like, that's the final climactic defeat moment of the arc. Everybody's in low spirits. They saw Luffy get defeated, yada yada. And then Luffy is saved by the timer going off and Imu being sent back home, right? That, to me, if this arc was set to end with a crushing defeat for Luffy and everybody, it would end with a crushing defeat for Luffy and everybody. But right now, what Oda's doing seems to be basically, the defeat happened. Now everything else that's happening in the story seems to actually be to take things back the other way, right? Gaban, he might get fucked up next chapter. Entirely possible. He might fucking die next chapter. But Oda's not ready to end the arc right here, which means that Luffy's defeat is not the end of the line, right? Oda's stalling for that. Zoro and Sanji, we know they need to get their power-ups against Somers and killing him. That's what those situations were written for them, right? So we already know a dissatisfying ending. That's not going to be the case, right? This is a setup for the Straw Hats to get stronger, right? Usopp, the rest of the Straw Hats, Oda's kind of setting them up as well to help in some way. We saw Usopp getting observation haki again. Loki, Oda could have just put Loki down and out for the count. Loki's not down and out for the count for whatever reason. Oda still has Loki conscious, and he's actually going to get treated for his wounds. If this was set for like an absolute board wipe, like defeat across the board, everything would have ended with this, you know? Luffy's defeat. Zoro and Sanji would have just been taken out by Imu the first time around, not getting back up for like a triumphant power-up against Somers and killing him. Like, this would be the ending point of the arc, if this was meant to be how the arc ends, in my opinion. You know, things can go a million ways. Maybe Oda's got something like an even bigger hammer to drop on everybody, but if you're just looking at everything outside of the Luffy situation, it's all set for a rally back, in my opinion. Also, Omen giving world government blades makes Blackbeard stealing Emu's fruit less likely. Yeah, I don't know if Blackbeard stealing Emu's fruit, because there's other crazy powerful fruits that Blackbeard could still get. There's other god fruits and stuff. So Blackbeard might be his own thing, but it is really interesting. AJ05, thanks for the 2. Was Usopp's hockey moment meant to be impressive, lol? No, I think this is just a tease. This is just a tease. It's a reminder that Usopp still got it, you know? So it's something else coming down the line. Let's get stream likes up to 150 real quick. Black Lightning 8225, thanks for the 2. Fun fact, every sword Emu has is weaker than Yoru. Is it, though? Because I don't know if Mihawk knows about those other blades. But yeah, I mean, I would agree it's likely that Yoru is meant to be the strongest sword in the world. Kyo Beats 5161, thanks for the 2. I've seen some people say that Yoru is is maybe the missing blade from Alabasta or something like that. I think essentially 9/11 for Mihawk fans would be if we find out that Yoru was a black blade in the first place. Like from the Void Century era, you know? I will say that all of this chapter is I'm joking. Let me say a little pros and a little cons, right? So if Yoru is a black blade from the fucking Void Century era, then Mihawk's entire black blade shtick, it just disappears, right? Now, flip side, all of this is significant upscale for the title World's Strongest Swordsman in general. You just can't, with a straight face and objectivity, argue anymore that being the world's strongest swordsman isn't an incredibly important title and status in the world of One Piece. Emu's pulling out new swords out of his ass every fucking chapter. Like, come on now. Like, all the fucking 20 kings, almost all of them, had legendary blades, right? Almost. Some of them were axes, whatever, right? But, come on. Like, being at the top of the world as a swordsman means something, right? This is an important title Zoro's shooting for, you know? Again, this might be the wild take, but I don't see why it is. For Zoro's dream to have validity, I think by the end of the story, he should be able to beat Emu in a swords-only duel. Swords-only duel. Meaning, if Emu's swords aren't magic, so no life sapping and stuff like that, just normal swords, right? Use a sword that doesn't have that special ability or whatever. 2, Emu can't use Maki and Omens to block attacks and yada yada, but just straight swords. You have to believe, in terms of good writing, right? Either you believe Oda's a good writer or not. If you believe Oda's a good writer, Zoro should be able to beat Emu in a swords-only duel at the end of the series with no other shenanigans, you know? And I think it's wild at this point to try and argue that Emu's not a swordsman. He's the most swordsman. He's got other abilities as well, but in the field of swordsmanship, he's not fucking, he's not just swinging swords around, you know? Like, he's, in the field of swordsmanship, you know, Zoro should be able to beat him. That's, like, now officially a character that Zoro should be above in swordsmanship by the end of the story. I think people get too caught up in the title swordsman, right? When we all know what it means, which is that in a sword duel, can you beat this other person, right? Because that's how the fucking Zoro-Mihawk final duel goal goes, you know? And at the same time, Zoro essentially throughout the story has basically viewed anybody who's got a sword or sword-like abilities as basically competition for him, even if they don't classify themselves as a swordsman. So, you know, you kind of have to look at it through Zoro's eyes. Kyo Beats 5161, thanks for the 2. New message. Kyo Beats 5161, thanks for the 5. Is it interesting that Roger's 2 wings face the final bosses of the series? Final bosses of the series? Roger's 2 wings face the final bosses of the series. Oh, Rayleigh faced Blackbeard, Gabon faced Emu. That is really interesting. I didn't think about it like that. That is really cool. Also, props to Rayleigh for driving away Blackbeard. I forgot about that scene. Stormfox7592, thanks for the 2. Have we seen Luffy more messed up than this? I think that's a hard call, because it's just Luffy gets messed up in so many different ways. It's like, Well, Crocodile once dried him out till he was a raisin, like literally like a piece of crumpled up paper. Um, I don't know what much you count that. Magellan left him like a pool of basically poison, slowly just, you know. Akainu left a permanent scar on him. I don't know if this will be a permanent scar. I think it's hard to say. I think I think it's hard to. I think it's up there. I think it's up there. The tier Trevisa, thanks for the 2. Prime S-Hawk might be stronger than Emu, to be honest. I don't think so. I don't think so. Brandon E6146 says Luffy literally died. I forgot. Yeah, that was I'm fucking stupid. Yeah, you're right. Nami hitting Luffy more damage than Emu. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Prime S-Hawk is stronger than Emu. I think there's no chance that. I think there's no world where. I think this is where things just go too far. Oda's not going to write Zoro having stronger opponents than Luffy. It's just not going to happen. Whale, thanks for the 2. Alabaster, chapter 161, page 10. Yoru cross shape in desert. Ooh, let's see. Okay, I might not share chapter visually here because I've mentioned this before, on chapter discussion streams, just to be safe from Shueisha or whatever. It's good not to just show any panels, period, even if it's not from the current chapter. Page 10, Yoru-shaped cross in the desert. No, I don't know. I think that's just a cross, right? I don't think that's a specific Yoru-shaped cross. I mean, it is a Yoru-shaped cross, but that's more so because Yoru is supposed to be like a cross, So it's like kind of little... Yoru is based off of the idea of an ornate cross to some degree. So other crosses aren't based off of Yoru. Yoru's based off of that imagery, Shadow57, X7G, thanks for the 5. Being a fellow power scaler as myself, I've realized that Emu's tail alone is more durable than Kaido. Tank Zoro's attack, hashtag Satan's tail over ZKK. I think if we're being fair, I mean, I don't know, but I don't think that's correct. I think if we're being fair, Emu likely coded himself to some degree, right? To I don't know. Let me see. Did he? Did he? Let's see. I don't remember exactly how that whole thing played out. I think Emu coded his tail in Haki. I think it looks like the tail is coded in Haki. So I kind of disagree. I think Emu's Haki is obviously better than Kaido's, but I don't think Emu just straight up is more durable than Kaido. I mean, he might be. Sorry, but I don't think that Emu's tail without Haki. Let's be very clear. I don't think Emu's tail without Haki could block Zoro's sword. Rud Howe, thanks for the 5. I feel like Oda himself doesn't hype up this title in the story unless Mihawk is mentioned. Zoro the only guy in the world who cares about pursuing it. I agree that the title's not that hyped up, but it is just what it... You could say Zoro's the only guy in the world who cares about pursuing it, but it's like he's also the second most focused on character in the entire narrative of One Piece, so it's not nothing. First mate of the Pirate King's goal, right? Yeah, I just don't really have more of a response to it than that. It's kind of like the hype is inherent in that when we see characters fighting with swords, it's like, okay, well, in a sword duel, this person should lose to Mihawk, this person should lose to Mihawk, this person should lose to Mihawk, And Twanic49, thanks for the 10. With all the weapon wheel stuff, I can imagine the Strahd's final opponents being various Gods Knights amped with Omen. I think the Strahd's unique talents should be enough to beat them. I think it would be cool. I don't know now. I don't know how the Blackbeard pirates fit in everything. I don't know. It's so, there's so many questions, Jotaro says, I think Law might be the second most focused on, to be honest. Law was only in... I mean, for 150 chapters, I guess you could say, but One Piece is a lot longer than that. Remontada553 says, it's not a dream you have to apply for, it's about being the strongest. You could even argue, there's an argument to be made that the goal is, like, because Mihawk exists, there's just people who are swordsmen don't really even bother trying to pursue it, because they just view the level of challenge as too much. I don't know. You could view it as that. It's not quite the same as with the One Piece, because with the One Piece, it's like a literal, like, everybody, the world views the One Piece as a huge treasure. That's why everybody initially started going after the One Piece. They wanted this big treasure. They're like, Gold Roger, where's your wealth and riches? It's a big treasure. Let's get it, right? With becoming the world's strongest sword, there was a clear incentive for every character to go after the One Piece. For a lot of characters, you could argue that the title King of the Pirates isn't so important as the One Piece itself, the treasure. Like Kaido, Big Mom, these characters, they more so talk about claiming the treasure. They do reference King of the Pirates at points, but it's the One Piece itself that people are after, right? So there's a hard incentive. Same way Buggy's after Captain John's treasure, right? Like, everybody sees no harm in throwing their hat in the race for the One Piece. I mean, they view it as very competitive, but it's kind of like there's a hard incentive. Like, we get this, and in their minds, we become the richest people in the world, or we get, like, this ultimate obscene treasure, right? World's Strongest Swordsman it's literally just personal achievement. You just want to be the strongest swordsman in the world. So it's very different than trying to chase King of the Pirates. There's no incentive to chase World's Strongest Swordsman other than just pure desire to be the strongest swordsman, right? It's kind of like in One Piece, you don't even see characters ever even mention that, hey, I want to become the strongest in the world, period. That's not a goal that anybody states. Does that make sense? So that's just something to consider. I would say, let me think. Luffy has said that he wants to become the strongest to protect his friends. That's come up multiple times, so that's part and parcel of Luffy's goals for himself. But in general, like, you could easily argue that, well, nobody tries to become the world's strongest man, like Whitebeard or whatever, therefore it's a meaningless title. It's like, no, the title has meaning. Like, it means something to be the strongest character in the world. Just because other people aren't actively pursuing it doesn't mean that the title doesn't carry inherent weight. Does that make sense? Henchme987 says, why though? Big Mom and Kaido are already rich as fuck. The way that the One Piece is viewed is a reflection of the way that Roger was kind of viewed, which is Kaido's like, Roger ruled the seas. That's how Kaido views him, right? Big Mom, when she's talking to Luffy about claiming the One Piece, she's like, fuck these other Yonko, red hair, Whitebeard, Kaido, etc. Like, the One Piece will be all for me. They've built up the One Piece because Roger's legend was so great. Everybody else has built up the One Piece in their minds to be so great that they essentially, like, it's kind of like saying, like, why do multimillionaires want to become billionaires? Why do billionaires dream of becoming Elon Musk? You know, like, just because Kaido and Big Mom rule a portion of the ocean, it's like, well, you're rich. Why do you want to be even more rich and powerful? It's like, we want everything. You know, and it kind of tracks with that mentality. The emperors, the conquerors of the sea, the reason that they rise to such heights in the world, in this One Piece world, is because they've got this mentality that I am the baddest motherfucker in the seas. Everything is mine, right? I don't want just a quarter of the new world. I want to run the whole thing. Like, this is me. I want to be, you know. They even talked about how, like, once they get the One Piece and the ancient weapons, the Kaido and Big Mom were like, once we get the One Piece and the ancient weapons, like, we're gonna rule the whole world, you know? Let's get Streamlux up to 150 real quick, because we're almost there. Stormfox7592, thanks for the 5. I think you downplay Emu because in the back of your head, you just assume Blackbeard is going to be the final villain, so Emu can't be that strong. No, I've said multiple times that Emu, to me, clearly is above. I think Emu is clearly above, like, not just a tier above the likes of, like, Roger, Whitebeard, etc. I think he's 2 tiers above. Me saying that Zoro, end of story, can beat... like, let's be clear. Even if I think that Blackbeard will be the final villain, I lean towards that. I don't think he's gonna gap Emu by a large amount. I think that he would still be in the same tier. You know, maybe I'm underestimating End of Story Blackbeard. I don't know, but I don't view Blackbeard as like a villain that's way above Emu. I just view it as like a villain that will probably be even above Emu by the end of the story, but not by a big margin. Like, we're talking marginal shit here, okay? When I say that, I think Zoro would be able to beat Emu if Emu is just allowed to use swords and not the special magic from the swords, right? That's more so me just pointing out how strong Zoro should be narratively based on what his entire dream entails at the end of the story, right? So it's not me downplaying Emu. It's just like, well, that's the fucking world's strongest swordsman whose dream is for even heaven to know his name. Arguably even God to know his name by that logic, right? That's not crazy for me to say that, because that's not putting Zoro on Emu's level by any stretch of the imagination. Emu with just his swords is basically the lowest level. Like, Emu with just his swords and not allowed to use any of the sword's magic is basically me just saying that it's the lowest level of fighting that Emu can do, you know? It's the absolute lowest level of abilities that Emu can fight with. It's basically base Emu. Does that make sense? Yeah. And Emu's full powers are more so centered around, obviously the sword's special abilities, but also Maki is really where his full power set is, you know? So to me, that's not downplaying Emu. It's just acknowledging where Zoro likely falls at the end of the story in terms of hierarchy. Not on Emu's tier by any means. Just if you restricted Emu to just base and just fighting with swords, it's essentially bad writing straight up. It's like essentially a betrayal of the second biggest character in One Piece if he still loses to Emu. Does that make sense? Crovis, thanks a lot. Shanks being close to Emu agenda is dead. No more Joy Boy hockey, and there's no chance is beating Emu in the foreseeable future. Emu greater than Prime God Valley. I mean, I definitely agree that Emu's greater than Prime God Valley, but isn't that a younger version of Shanks? Like, Shanks said that years and years and years ago, you know? So we don't know how strong Shanks is now. I don't think those two things are quite the same. I don't know. I'm not saying Shanks is close to Emu or anything like that, but if Shanks does have hockey comparable to Joy Boy, there's two things, okay? There's Shanks as we've seen him in the past, where he's like, forget Emu. He was clearly nowhere close to even Loki in strength at that point in time, right? There's that Shanks, right? Then there's the belief that Shanks... Then there's the way things we've heard about Shanks today, right? So the way other characters have kind of talked about him today is that supposedly Shanks Shanks became strong enough that he supposedly defeated Loki. We don't know. And there's been comparisons made to Joy Boy's hockey, right? We don't know if either of these things are true at this moment in time, right? Maybe Shanks didn't beat Loki straight up. Maybe he had to cheat. Maybe whatever, right? Maybe he and Loki had some fucking agreement that they made. We don't know, right? We don't know if Dory and Brogy were being accurate with the Joy Boy hockey thing. They just drew that comparison. We don't fucking know, right? But if these two things are true, if Shanks is in fact stronger than Loki, and if in fact Shanks' hockey is comparable to Joy Boy, then yeah, he would be close to Emu, you know? But that's only if those things are true. Right now, Shanks is this black box. We don't really know. Maybe he never became that much stronger than the Harold's Castle battle. Maybe that never happened. Maybe that was basically where he capped out. You know, he was already dueling Mihawk for World's Strongest Swordsman title back then. Maybe that's when he had two hands. Maybe. So there's a large spectrum of where Shanks could kind of fall, in terms of all this, right? It could be all the way, you know, back then. Maybe that was the strongest he ever was, with his two hands dueling Mihawk. Blah 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 blah. Maybe it was that. You know, in which case, clearly below Harold, Loki, and stuff like that. Or maybe it's all the way over here, where it's like, if the claims are correct, or if the things we've heard are true, where he's stronger than Loki, Joy Boy level hockey, then he's like at the very tippy top of the world, right? Not too far from Emu. So there's a wide range. Shadows 57. All I'll say is that I think that claiming that those, I would say with these characters, Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon, there's not anything that can close the loop. Like, we have not seen or been told any hard limits on these characters just yet. So there's no point to, well, in Mihawk's case, you have to ignore Marineford, right? So if we ignore Marineford, we have not seen any sort of limits or been told any sort of limits lately of their abilities, right? So they're kind of all question marks in that area, you know? I think it's just safer to, again, like for me, if I do power scalings or top 30s now or whatever, I'm just leaving those three out. There's no point because it's purely, we kind of just have to find, Oda's essentially left the door open for them. There are three characters that Oda's essentially left the door in Whitebeard weapons. And, oh, you think that he'll have a weapon that's not even a sword that's stronger than Mihawk's? Let's get Streamlabs up to 150 real quick, because we're almost there. Let's get Streamlabs up to 150. Tapio Treviso says Shanks, Dragon, and Mihawk are clearly stronger than what fan assumptions have been post time skip. So let me draw a little here. This will be fun. Let me draw a little thing, okay? Because things have evolved over time. All right, things have evolved over time. So perceptions have evolved over time. So if we look at different points of the story, right? So let's say Marineford, MF. Okay, this was the era. Marineford was really the first era. Before Marineford, everything was kind of floating. Like we had so many characters. We had we met a million strong characters throughout pre-time skip, but it was hard to scale where they landed in the world because every time we ran into them, we would just see that okay, these characters are a million times stronger than Strats. That's all we had to work with, right? We ran into Aokichi. Whoa, way stronger than the Strats. How do we really scale that to fucking Mihawk? You know, who was also way stronger than the Strats, right? Everything pre-Marineford was just a big question mark. And okay, hold on. Let me do this. Pre-MF. Okay? This is a bad P. Pre-MF. Okay? No, you know what? I don't want to write anything. We knew Whitebeard is number one. And then number one, Whitebeard, number one. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we knew everything else was just a big mess. That's all we knew. Okay? We knew there was these other Yonko who were comparable to Whitebeard, but Whitebeard was number one. We didn't know how characters like Mihawk fit into that. He's a swordsman, so he's in there. But then the Admirals were a huge deal. We were told that the Admirals are used to counterbalance the Yonko. We didn't know. There's a lot of question marks, okay? And then we get Marineford, all right? We get Marineford. After Marineford, the belief was generally old gen, because we were basically told throughout that during this period in time, Roger was the god, Whitebeard was the one god that was the old school god that was equal to that god, but now he's still world number one, but just kind of whatever below. Then we had Yonko, and then Yonko Admirals. It kind of depended how you view it. Same tier, different tier. Everyone else, and then some people. Dragon was a question mark. We didn't know where Dragon went. A lot of people felt like Dragon is in this group, question mark. And then Mihawk, I don't even want to talk about Mihawk because Mihawk's reputation was in the fucking dirt after Marineford. I remember this going into Marineford, hoping to see a lot of shit from Mihawk. Mihawk was kind of discussed generally with the attitude of like, maybe he's in the Yonko and Admiral tier, but it's hard to fucking say. This was largely because at that point in time, we did not have confirmation of whether Haki and sword skill were like the same thing. Now we know Haki and sword skill same thing, but back then we just had this new concept of Haki, and a lot of people would argue that okay, Mihawk, it seems like a Vista level character. Yada yada. Okay, So that's where shit was. And then, you know, under here we had Shichibukai, yada, yada, yada. But old gen was gods back then. That was the thing. Old gen were gods. And this view continued all the way. This kind of view of the landscape continued all the way till Elbaf. Okay? Seriously. Like, Marineford shaped views that decisively. It continued all the way to Elbaf. I would argue Wano had one change, which was like, I think Wano still everyone viewed old gen. But I think around the time of Wano, people began separating out Yonko and Admirals because we got confirmation of how Conqueror's Haki was a big deal. Admirals didn't seem to have Conqueror's Haki. And then Mihawk was now confidently put into this group as well. And then Dragon was still a question mark, okay? Is this making sense? This is generally how things were, but the old gen were still considered the gods, okay? This was my view, this was a lot of people's view, etc., okay? Admirals, a lot of people started moving below the Yonko, but you had some arguments. I would say, here, let's put a question mark. You still had a solid faction arguing Admirals equal to Yonko, etc., okay? It's just, I'm kind of going with the gist of what people would say, all right? Now, Elbaf has turned everything topsy-turvy, because now we know Emu / Joy Boy above the old gen, right? But it's not just that. Loki. Is Loki above the old gen? And then now, it's like, wait a second, these characters that we thought were just Yonko level, like Dragon, Shanks, Mihawk, are they actually also let's say mid-age gen? Are these guys also up here with Loki? We don't know. Or stronger, right? Are they also in this tier above the old gen? And that just leaves fucking Kaido, Big Mom here. They're still, I think most people still have them below the old gen. Fucking Roger's Wings. Roger, Wings, maybe. Sorry for my handwriting, but it is what it is. So it's kind of been a shuffle that's happening potentially. Now, we don't know if the middle-aged gen is actually above the old gen. Maybe the middle-aged gen still belongs right here, alongside Kaido, Big Mom, and stuff. This is a question mark. This is a question mark. But that's basically how things have shuffled around, right? So we kind of saw before, pre-Marineford, it's a virgin world. Nobody knows what's what. We just know there's a lot of characters way stronger than the Strats. And this old-ass dude, Whitebeard, is number one. Why? Because he's the only dude who fought Roger in the past. And Roger was so much stronger than everybody else. That's what we thought. That the fact that even this ancient old dude is still world number one simply because in his prime he was equal to Roger, right? So that gives us the idea that the old gen guys, Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, these guys are the fucking gold standard. The Yonko who we have today, Kaido, Big Mom, old Whitebeard, Shanks, they're below that, right? Admirals, maybe they're competitive with the Yonko, maybe not, depends who you ask. This was the opinion around this point in time. Dragon, we haven't seen Dragon do jack shit, but he's probably in this group as well, right? But nobody is with our sacred old gen of Roger, Whitebeard, Prime Garp, yada yada. Continue on to Wano. Wano reinforces this old gen situation. Why? Because we got the Roger Whitebeard flashback, and Roger and Whitebeard clearly show Haki way above what anybody else nowadays is showing. And you know who else gasses up the old gen? Fucking Kaido. Current gen is gassing up the old gen. He's like, you might be hot shit, Luffy, but you're nothing compared to Roger. He was like the Haki god. I fucking look up to that dude. I see silhouettes of Roger, Whitebeard, rocks when I imagine how high your ceiling can go and stuff like that. Interestingly, Shanks and Oden also in there, but people didn't want to talk about that. So Wano essentially continues to reinforce the idea of old gen being above the current Yonko generation. And if anything, the emphasis on Conqueror's Haki and stuff now makes it less of an argument for the Admirals. So it kind of shifts things around, and it felt like people had a clear sort of hierarchy. Egghead creates an argument for the admirals again, but again, there's no broad consensus. There's always going to be disagreements. You'll have people who think that the admirals were above the Yonko this whole time, etc., right? But Elbaf has shifted everything, because now Elbaf essentially dropped the old gen a bunch. It's focusing on Emu, Joy Boy, and it's essentially arguing that this next generation of characters that came after the old gen, which is like Shanks, Dragon, Mihawk, Loki, those characters actually may have surpassed the old gen, you know? They might be above the old gen, and Oda was just hiding it this whole time. That's an entirely possible thing too. And in which case, all the previous characters, Yonko Admirals, who are not in that group, now go even further. So that's what Elbaf has essentially done with this whole situation. And I think that's why this is a period of time where there's so much sort of like confusion, I think, because we're supposed to be confused, because this hierarchy, since pre-Marineford, we always had Whitebeard Roger at the top. Marineford, we still had the old gen at the top. Fucking Wano, we still had the old gen at the top. This single arc has caused so much chaos because it's thrown the old gen not just like a tier below Emu and Joy Boy. It's potentially like several tiers below, like multiple tiers below those characters, and characters who we've had around for a long time, like Shanks, like Dragon, like Mihawk, who we'd previously been implied are below the old generation, are now potentially being revealed to be above the old generation. So it's confusing stuff, but I think the progression kind of makes sense if you just think Oda wanted to make it stronger every generation, but he wanted to save the hype reveals of how strong Shanks, Dragon, Mihawk type characters were till the end of the story, you know? It makes sense from Oda's perspective, but it also makes sense from the audience's perspective why there'd be so much pushback against this, because it's essentially all the propaganda that Oda fed us for 1,100 chapters. No exaggeration. All the propaganda he fed us for 1,100 chapters, he's kind of revealing to be propaganda, you know? Unless we're being premature here, because it's still entirely possible that we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's possible that Loki is the only character who's above the old generation, and Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon are still below, and that's the hierarchy that we'd previously been told isn't actually changed too much. Now it's just Emu, Joy Boy, and Loki who are above the likes of the old generation, right? Does that make sense? So it's entirely possible, but the fact that Oda's thrown all of this into question in the first place with this arc is what's really throwing people for a loop, and it's causing a lot more debate than we've ever had before. Shit. Let me catch up on supers real quick. All right, continuing on. Jaquan1254, thanks to the 5. Kaido probably got drunk and cried after Marineford. Yeah, probably. He's probably drunk for the next year. The Lowman123, thanks to the 5. I think Old Gen has generally had better portrayal than Mid Gen, and I think they're still a bit stronger. So that's the thing, Lowman. I 100% agree. That was kind of what I drew on that little chart thing, if it made sense. Oda has portrayed the Old Gen as the gold standard. Everybody talks them up. Everybody hypes them up. Oda gets off on showing even like literally the aged versions of characters like Whitebeard and Garp just going to town and fucking up characters who are like in their prime, right? So Oda has, broadly speaking, throughout the story, really tried to paint the picture of like the seas back then were just a different level. He has done that, right? Now, it's possible that Oda has basically been hiding because Oda likes to keep things close to his chest. So it's possible that he's just been hiding the fact that a few characters from the next generation, aka the God Valley children, Dragon, Shanks, I suppose in the future Blackbeard, and then I guess Mihawk, who wasn't at God Valley, etc., right? But Oda may have been hiding that there are characters today who are actually going to be revealed to be even stronger than them, right? But Oda wanted to keep that a bit of a secret for endgame reveals, right? So it's possible that that is the route that Oda is going. Because so far, I think just in terms of how characters have talked about them, etc., the old generation is the gold standard still, right? Throughout the story. But if Oda's kind of been building towards revealing that they had been surpassed by the next generation of pirates and, characters or whatever. Now it would be the time that Oda kind of starts revealing that, and it's going to feel jarring for a lot of people because it goes so blatantly against what Oda fed us for so long, It's kind of, but I don't blame Oda for that because, one, it's exciting. It's an exciting way to do things, and it's an exciting way to slowly open up the world. Two, it kind of follows this sort of train of basically like, um, like if you're just batching it into groups, right? This is not by age. This is by the groups in which they kind of came up as pirates or like became big names, right? You have the older generation, the God Valley generation, right? And then them being surpassed arguably by Shanks, Dragon, Mihawk, stuff like that. You've got that generation, and then this final generation where you've got Luffy, Blackbeard. Loki still belongs to that. Yeah, like Shanks, Dragon, Loki, Mihawk potentially surpassing the old generation, right? But Oda doesn't want to really fully reveal that till the end game of the story to make the final war more dramatic. And then you finally have the generation that'll be the strongest, which is Luffy, strongest pirate ever, Blackbeard, second strongest pirate ever, Zoro's strongest swordsman, probably of recent times or whatever, right? Really getting to the final generation, so you want a continuous progression, right? So it's arguable that it's possible Oda went that route, fucking Kobe, maybe strongest marine of all time, who knows? So he possibly went that route. He wanted to hide how strong characters like Shanks, Mihawk, and Dragon are till the very end of the story to make it more exciting. Therefore, he spent more time embellishing just how far ahead the old generation were. So that's an argument. I don't know. It's entirely possible that we had things correct already. The current generation, or like the newer generation, never surpassed the old generation. Only Loki is above them, right? That's entirely possible too. I'm just saying that you could see it both ways. We're kind of at an intersection where Oda might just start revealing a lot of things that we didn't really know before that shake up how we viewed the world. The Loman123, thanks for the 5. Are you basing that off Loki's performance against Imu? I don't think if Imu was going all out against him. No, it's literally everything. Loki was already established again above the old generation from his first fight with Harold. His fight against Domiroversi Harold. Loki is already essentially as strong or stronger than the old generation in that battle. And Gaban literally outright confirms it afterwards. He outright says, Domiroversi Harold, God's Knight Harold beats everybody on the planet, including Whitebeard. Nobody could have stopped him except Loki, right? Nobody could have put him down. So Gaban outright tells us Loki is on a level that he's seen that's above Roger, Whitebeard, etc., yada yada, right? So we're outright shown that from the beginning. Even with just Loki's abilities in general, I mean, come on, like, they're fucking ludicrous, right? He can blow up islands. He's essentially a walking ancient weapon. He can blow up islands with a single attack, right? That's not anything that the old gen really could do. And then finally against Imu, we don't have a clear point of comparison because we never saw Imu straight up box with any of the old generation. We did see Loki box with Harold, so we already kind of have that, like, buffed Harold, so we already have that established, right? And then this is Loki. Yeah, Imu didn't go all out, but we have nothing to suggest Imu would ever have to go all out against someone like Roger or something like that, right? And then this is Loki heavily, heavily, heavily nerfed. Like, this is the absolute, like, this is borderline, like, Marineford Whitebeard level of nerfed, what we saw with Loki here, Not quite the same, because he could still use Conqueror's Haki and everything, but this is the most nerfed version of Loki you could possibly have. And he still lasted a good amount of time against Imu and forced Imu to use many named attacks, So it wasn't like Imu just zero diffed him or anything like that. And this was against a very weak version of Loki, So it's kind of like Loki's strength was already established from the God's Knight Harold fight, right? As by all accounts being above the old generation. This is further established over and over the further we go, with all of Loki's abilities being revealed to us. His abilities are just ludicrously unfair, right? It's just, he's a nightmare matchup for literally anybody in the universe that's not Imu, right? And then it's further supported by just seeing how he did against the strongest character we've ever seen on screen by far, right? So yeah, that's just some stuff to continue to consider. Like, it was established from the God's Knight Herald fight, and then everything we've seen since then only further reinforces that, yeah, Loki's on another level than the old generation. Maybe that's completely wrong. Maybe we'll get some comments or something that disprove that, and maybe we put the God's Knight Herald fight into perspective. I'm just changing my opinion based on new information that we get. Because I, for a long time, as you guys probably know from streams, was very clear that I viewed like Roger, Whitebeard, etc. as the strongest in the world, or the strongest in One Piece history outside of Emu Joy Boy. I did not think we would have very many characters surpassing them. But over the course of Elbaf, I've had to like rethink a lot of my assumptions and biases, and I'm just going based off what we are being shown and what characters are telling us, and what Oda seems to be implying is new information that we need to open up our minds about, you know? If Gaban like straight up fucks up Emu next chapter or something, then yeah, I'll rethink a lot of stuff. I just find that unlikely based on the fact that even against Herald, Gaban was clearly nowhere close to Loki's strength, you know? We kind of already saw them side by side. Pool of Dead 3088, thanks for the 5. Do you think Eris is alive today? Surprised she survived God Valley, and I'm curious what her future role in the story is. She didn't get a title card. That is a really good question. That's a really, really good question. The thing with Eris is, like, I feel like she must be dead, because that was probably a formative experience for Blackbeard, and we'll get that in his backstory, but, you know, who really knows? Also, let's get the stream likes up to 200 real quick. Jaquan1254, thanks for the 20. Actually thought this time, it's probably not that deep, but the idea of Emu using propaganda to lower the ceiling is interesting. Don't risk anybody reaching Joy Boy by making Whitebeard or Kaido the peak, set the dream lower. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's like a full agenda thing that Emu did. I would say that simply put, Herald, Rox, Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, like these are some of the strongest characters to come around in like the last 100 years or whatever. Right? But they're still not Joy Boy or Emu's level. Then we potentially had a couple newcomers, Shanks, Dragon, and Mihawk. Potentially. This is maybe the case. I'm not sold yet, let's be clear, I'm not sold yet that generation is actually above the old generation, right? So we have these newcomers, Shanks, Dragon, Mihawk, Loki, right? That's the next sort of batch. That's like the post God Valley wave, right? So they come up, and the interesting difference between them and the old generation is that they all have reasons to essentially not display their power as much, and they're more, fuck, my pen, they're more mystery figures, right? So if you go from the top, Dragon is a character who, like the old generation, their strength was widely known and renowned because they became these huge pirates that like tore through the world, did all sorts of crazy stuff, eventually built their empires, yada yada, right? Like they're just the scourge of the seas, right? The next batch that came up didn't really do that, which is why there is arguably, it could make sense in narrative why there might be a disconnect that makes sense, right? In terms of perception versus reality, right? So if you take it from the top, like Dragon, he's a character who basically went about it the long route. He's not trying to become a pirate, go crazy on the seas and stuff. He's a man of mystery in the shadows. He wants to hide his strength, build his forces to finally make a big push when the time comes, right? So of course, you could never really scale Dragon compared to the previous generation, right? People barely know what he looks like, is what it sounds like, right? I mean, obviously they've got the wanted posters, but he's a rare figure, right? Then you've got Shanks, who, from what we know in this chapter, and generally the final words from Roger, yada yada, Shanks is also a character who wasn't so focused on becoming like this crazy pirate who went out doing all sorts of crazy shit. He was a dude who was like, okay, I've been given this mission, and I'm going to go about it basically playing the long game. So Shanks and Dragon are two characters who are playing the long game. Shanks did ultimately build a pirate empire, but it wasn't in the same sense as like a Kaido, Big Mom, or even a Whitebeard. Shanks has been noted to be a very pacifistic figure, and he kind of just created his own little hub and fleets that he treats under his protection, and then that's basically it. But he's been regularly noted to be a pacifistic man. The Gorosei point out that he's not the type of guy to even cause trouble, yada yada. So again, Dragon, Shanks, two characters where it makes sense. They don't try to make waves, so reputation-wise, they may not have reached the reputation of the old generation, right? Mihawk is a character who never wanted to, as far as we know, again, go out, do crazy stuff, build a pirate empire, yada yada. Mihawk just wanted a personal title, which is World's Strongest Swordsman, as far as we know, and that means that all of his duels are just with Shanks, and so, again, the most that the world can know about him is that he became the world's strongest swordsman, right? So you see what I'm saying, like, more and more limited stuff. And finally, with Loki, the interesting thing about Loki is that Loki never, from what it sounds like, turned into his Nidhogg form in those years that he was out rampaging on seas, like rampaging on the seas. I doubt that Loki was actually doing that much rampaging. That was just what we were told. But Loki's actually kind of a good guy who doesn't like, he's not just going to go around crushing humans for no reason, right? So Loki, for whatever reason, he couldn't actually get to his goal of the world government. We were told that nobody could actually stop him or get in his way during this time until Shanks came along. But it's actually also been revealed that Loki wasn't really using his Devil Fruit abilities during that time either, you know? At least not overtly. So yeah, it's kind of like, if you look at it in that lens, like, the old generation was a generation that kind of grabbed the world by its balls and just, like, tore through the ocean, doing all sorts of crazy shit. The next generation, it came along, but everybody in that generation was more, like, the characters from that generation that did try and, like, tear through the world, become the next Pirate King, etc. Those were characters like, those were essentially the Shichibukai, right? Like the Doflamingos, the Gecko Morias, the Crocodiles of the world, right? And they're not quite the same level, which actually then adds credence in the world's reputation that the old generation was really something else. The characters that did turn out to be very strong are characters who are more, who are less, as far as we can tell, how do I say this? Less open with using their strength, if that makes sense. So they kind of became more, even if they did actually become stronger than their predecessors, like maybe Dragon's stronger than Garp, maybe Shanks is stronger than Roger, right? Maybe Mihawk's stronger than all the swordsmen of the previous generation, right? Meaning Rock's Roger, right? Even if that did happen, the way they displayed their strength and how they went about going through the world was actually to keep it as limited as possible, which doesn't lead to building the same reputation that the old generation has. So that's an in-story cannot, like, explanation if we need to apply it. Does that make sense? Anyway, less violent. Yeah, I mean, it's not even less violent. Like, I'd argue Mihawk's, like, one of the most fucking violent characters in the series. He destroyed an entire fleet for no fucking reason. But that's kind of just to kill time and be bored, like, because he's bored. It sounds like his own personal journey to the top and making a name for himself stopped at dueling Shanks, right? And so all the world really knows is that he's the world's strongest swordsman, not Shanks, right? That's what the world knows. And then in terms of Shanks, Shanks himself is the least overt of the emperors, who gets into fights the least, who's the most pacifistic, who does the least, etc. Therefore, Shanks may not have been able to build the reputation that a Roger or Whitebeard has, you know? That's all. That's all. Those are my explanations, and then Dragon speaks for himself. Loki, we need some fucking explanations as to what Loki was doing for all these years, because it's just like, we're told a few conflicting things. Nobody was able to stop him till he ran into Shanks, right? So that's one thing. But it sounds like he wasn't using his fruit overtly that much to keep it under wraps or something like that. Yeah, so Loki's full strength and reputation didn't spread maybe the way that it should have, and it's like, why couldn't he get to the world government in that time? Can he literally just fly to the Red Line? I don't know. Like, if I was Loki, I would just fly up to the Red Line, shoot some Thorheims at it, and then, like, fucking fly away if they try and catch me. Alright, continuing on. Krovitz, thanks a lot. So we're ignoring decades of portrayal, statements, and feats that state old gen greater than everyone bar Emu because of a misunderstanding of Harold versus Loki. I think there's no misunderstanding of Harold versus Loki, so I think it would probably be the other way around in that statement you just made. And the statements and feats wouldn't necessarily apply to Loki. Like, you just, like, you're, like, read your own line, right? You said everyone bar Emu. So why are we saying everyone bar Emu, right? because we're acknowledging that Imu was an unknown quantity in the world, and therefore doesn't really apply to all of the previous statement, feats, and portrayal of the old gen, right? So if you acknowledge Imu as an unknown quantity, you basically have to acknowledge that that opens the door for other unknown quantities to actually be revealed to be stronger than the old gen, right? AKA Loki, new unknown quantity that's being introduced, right? He wasn't really, like, we know the facts about him. We know what he's done. And we also know the fact that he didn't ever really show his full powers during that period of time, right? And it's kind of like you have to essentially, whether you like it or not, you have to take into account the new feats and portrayal that Oda is giving, right? It's just the way that storytelling goes. And the new feats and portrayal and storytelling that Oda is giving is that not only is Loki likely stronger than the old generation, not only has he likely surpassed his father, Loki is literally one of the most powerful beings to ever exist, in that he's essentially supposed to be the counterpart to Nika, right? Luffy is still not where he needs to be, but Loki is the successor to the previous god of war, right? That was the only one to be equal to Joy Boy back then, right? His role in the story, like, it's literally, he's on the fucking mural, right? So things have kind of progressed past characters like Whitebeard or whatever, like, who happens to be the strongest pirate on the ocean at a given time. That doesn't seem as significant as characters who are set to basically bring the dawn of the world, you know, and bring an end to the cycle of 3 worlds, like 3 literal eras, millennia, or whatever you want to say, of conflict, right? So we're reaching characters who are basically destined to arguably be stronger than the previous generation, you know? We just, yeah, we have to kind of take it as, like, you know, unknown quantities don't really fall into the previous feats and product. Like, if you can make an excuse for Imu, there's no reason you can't make an excuse for Loki, right? If you're acknowledging that Imu is outside the sphere of how the old generation were portrayed and the feats and statements, etc., then you have to accept that new characters like Loki or Dragon, who's been a hidden figure, right? They also could arguably be outside that sphere, you know? You can say you don't like it, but you have to agree that the logic still holds up. R-Double, thanks for the 5. Both Usopp's observation hockey moments ignite from Luffy being in danger. We saw their friendship boost in Luffy and Enies Lobby. Seems it goes both ways. That's a really great point. That's a really, really, really great point. I love that. Love that point. That's a phenomenal point. Phenomenal point. Kid is an exception to that rule, though. He truly is an enigma. Yeah. The Lowman, thanks for the 10. I see your reasoning, but when it comes to the Herald fight, I think once Loki landed the first hit on Herald, the Holy Knight contract seal was broken, and Herald stopped fighting back and let Loki win. The Lowman, I say this as politely as I possibly can. It's cool that you think that once Loki landed the first hit, that the Holy Knight contract seal was broken and Herald stopped fighting back and let Loki win. It's cool that you think that, but your thoughts have to also, you know, be consistent with reality. Which is that you can't headcanon something that is literally not the case in the story. So I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to that. Bunfagun3021, thanks for the 14. Do you think Oda intentionally inverted Zoro and Sanji by having Sanji connect with his true instincts, while Zoro actually has to think about his abilities instead of relying on his intuition? I think that's a really interesting way to put it. I think let's see how they get to their next level of, like, Conqueror's Haki Mastery or whatever, but it is true that Zoro as a character has always been very, you know, like, I wouldn't say bloodthirsty, but he's kind of, like, from the beginning, from his very first page, Kobe comments that he's just oozing this intimidating aura. Like, Zoro is a character who just Conqueror's Haki is innate to him, right? He, in fact, showed Conqueror's Haki before even Luffy. He showed most forms of Haki before even Luffy, because he's just, that's who the character is, right? So, Zoro essentially having to learn to rein in his nature, I think, is perfect. And then Sanji, he has that same potential, but he buries it because he just views himself. It all goes back to their opening character arcs in Baratier, and I think that's perfect writing. But what's interesting is that's one of the reasons that I strongly dislike the messaging of the King fight, because it gets at a problem that Zoro never really had, which is it's like, oh, Zoro, you need to just let out your haki. You need you need to be letting, like, you need to let go and be ready to die and stuff like that, right? And it's like he's always like that. That's innate to him. I wish that if to like get him to unlock Conqueror's haki, I wish that there was a different angle, because it's not new, you know? Because the King fight mirrors the Mr. One fight, and that Zoro's hit a limit. He has to kind of have some personal realizations in order to grow. But back then, it was the reverse. In that back then, with the Mr. One fight, Zoro's fighting like he always does, like giving it his all, going all out, going crazy, throwing his life on the line, tanking through so much damage, and just trying to fight as hard and do as much as possible. And he basically had to have this aha awakening as he thinks back to his master's teaching, that there is something, like there is strength to this stillness and just being able to stop and listen and hear the beating of the of the steel, the rhythm of the breath of all things, right? The like being able to actually focus his power, right? That was beautiful. The King fight is kind of makes no sense, in the sense that it's basically just Zoro fighting as he normally does, but this is supposed to be some sort of realization for him. So I've never liked that. I like the angle that we're getting now, which is that Zoro, you've got all this crazy Conqueror's haki that you just are constantly releasing, but you need to use it in a refined manner. You need to control it, right? That feels more similar to kind of the messaging of the Mr. One fight, you know? And then Sanji being the inverse makes perfect sense for his character as well. Alcyon9570, thanks for the 10. Somers introduced his blade, Graham. Hopefully next chapter, Zoro introduces his blade. This is Enma. Any chance Sandai Katetsu breaks in this fight? Thoughts? Oda might reveal Blackblade info in this fight. Blackblade info. I don't know about Blackblade. I don't know. Zoro introducing it. I don't know if he would just introduce Enma. I feel like his other, like, I feel like Watto's more important to him, but maybe he does, because Enma also seems to be a sword that does cool things, I guess you could say. Sandai Katetsu, I don't know. I don't know about the swords mattering as much in this fight as, like, just a Conqueror's haki awakening or something, so that's an interesting angle. Let's wait and see. Pinna Park, thanks, sent the Unk alert for 440 jewels. Harold literally said, hurry before it comes back. He was referring to, okay, let's look at it again. He was referring to the control, right? The control that Imu had over him. It would be what, chapter 68? 1170? No, 70, right? 1170, or is it 71? No, it's 50, 60, 61, right? What chapter would this be? No, 71. Okay. No, 70. All right, let's see. All right, I can't show panels just because it's a chapter discussion stream, but I'll read. All right, so you said the first time that Loki hit Harold, the God's Night mark went away, and therefore the seal was broken. But that's not true, because Loki hits Harold, the God's Night seal does go away, but Harold continues fighting him, meaning that the control is still there over Harold, number one, because Harold's still fighting him, and number two, Harold's still regenerating, so getting rid of the mark doesn't do anything. Does that make sense? That's why I'm saying, just because you think that the effect stopped because the mark was temporarily gone, doesn't mean that that's what actually happened, because we can literally see that's not the case. He said, Loki says, hey, are you back to your senses now? Only for the moment, don't be mistaken. Look around, blah, 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 you're being controlled. And then his arm's still regenerating. He's still regenerating. His face is regenerating. It's literally, his whole arm is back, dude. His whole arm regenerates. His whole arm is back. He has regeneration, and he has the God's Night buff. The only thing that's happened is that he's broken from the control. But that happens after Loki's already been beating the shit out of him. So what's your argument here? Tiptia Treviso, thanks for 2. Hunter x Hunter stream showed why Morge is a solo leveling fan. I mean, I'm a solo leveling fan because it's a really fun series. If you want to critique my Hunter x Hunter knowledge, I would suggest you check out my Hunter x Hunter analysis of the current arc, which is currently the best analysis of the current arc out there. If you want to get on my case for, like, I don't have absolute memory of, like, every single Hunter x Hunter guard and character, that's totally fine. I should have probably reread beforehand. But in terms of like in-depth Hunter x Hunter analysis, I refer you to my Hunter x Hunter analysis video, which I guarantee is the best analysis video of the current arc that is out there at the moment. If you got any doubts of my analysis of other series, Manga Morge exists, Movie Morge exists, just I'll refer you to those. Shanks glazing Emu while Loki believes he can win a fight shows the difference in Conqueror's level. I don't know. I think Shanks is supposed to have crazy strong Conqueror's Haki, but also just maybe he had to grow his Conqueror's Haki over time. Who knows? Where's that video? Check out Manga Morge. Tutorial trip. Tiptio says Morge stop self-glazing. Tiptio, sometimes I don't know what goes on in your head, man. Because you come at me with smoke. You're like, Morge, you... Tiptio, sometimes the logic train is just... I think there's a gap there. Because it's like... I didn't just come out and be like, oh, I've got a great Hunter x Hunter analysis. You were like... You basically were like... You didn't have good Hunter x Hunter analysis, right? So I responded with like, well, you can literally watch my video on it if you want an actual understanding of what's going on in the arc, you know? Maybe educate yourself. And then you're like, well, Morge, why are you self-glazing? It's like, dude, where's your memory at? Where's your short-term memory, working memory, Tiptio? Just what happened before my statement? Just 1, 2, 3. That's all. I don't know. Last video uploaded 3 years ago. Yeah, maybe I'll put out more Hunter x Hunter videos on there. Because I'm enjoying, like, I love the series. Do need to do a reread of the arc to give it more justice, because I've realized more things in the last reread of the previous run, 400 to 410. So I have notes from there that I want to incorporate, but, you know. The Lowman, 1, 2, 3, thanks for the 5. So you think the control wasn't broken immediately, only after Loki beat up Harold more? The control, what? The Lowman. It's not I think. You gotta stop saying I think. There's no I think. You gotta stop saying I think. You gotta read the panels. He keeps fighting. You just gotta read the panels, man. You just gotta read the panels. There's no I think. It's a fight. It's just the reading of the panels, man. It's just the reading of the panels. That's all it is. They fight. They continue to fight. After fighting for a bit, then Harold's like, I've got control back, right? But the buffs are still there. His arm's still regenerating. The seal isn't just magically broken. He's just got control back, dude. There's no I think. It's just the panels, man. This is why we can't have agreement in the One Piece community, because it's just like, we can all see the same thing, and then some people selectively erase it in their minds. Isis KE7DT, thanks for the 5. Another reason why Luffy being frozen would be good is because you could get Luffy in ice while Emu is active, and Luffy would have to contend with that. I don't know if Luffy would be conscious during this time, but it'd be interesting if he has to watch what's happening over there. That'd be kind of crazy. Yeah. That'd be interesting. All right. All right. All right. Yunus Ahmed, I was about to call stream, but let's see. Yunus Ahmed 2940, thanks for the 10. Don't know if this was asked already, but is Emu a swordsman / man? If so, what does this mean for Mihawk? Maybe we can get past that with the parrot theory. Yeah, because if he's a parrot, then it doesn't apply, right? That's fuck. If he's a parrot, then that's a good way to sidestep. Zoro would just be like, I'm the world's strongest swordsman, but I'm not the world's strongest swords creature. That would be his argument. We've talked at length about the Mihawk angle in this, so I don't really know what to... I don't want to deep dive into that and then spend another 20 minutes of my life. I think I just said straight up, by the end of... All I know is by the end of the story, regardless of Mihawk's saddle, whatever, by the end of the story, in a straight sword duel, Zoro should be able to beat anyone, which meaning that by the end of the story, Zoro should be able to beat Emu if Emu is not allowed to use Haki, or not Haki, if Emu is not allowed to use Maki, any of his Omen shenanigans, or any of his sword magic. all right? If all of that is taken out of the equation, Imu's just allowed to use a sword, no gimmicks, just plain duel with Zoro. Yeah, Zoro should beat him by that point in the story. So that is the only thing I'll claim. I'm not going to get into all of Mihawk stuff, etc. Freudian slip with no Haki. No, Haki's allowed in a sword duel. Haki's allowed in a sword duel. All right. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. Oh, Better Call Saul update before you go. So, Better Call Saul, right now, I didn't make any progress through season 6, so I'm still only a couple, 3 episodes through season 6. Maybe I'll finish it out this weekend. This week has been crazy stressful work-wise. And so what I realized is I don't like watching Better Call Saul when I already feel stressed, because the show is a sort of stress exacerbator in a good way. It's a great show. But I realized that when I'm in a state of like being more like I just want to relax, I'll just watch random YouTube videos, or I'll rewatch some fun anime scenes or something like that from rewatching stuff that you already enjoy with pretty colors, just turn my brain off. That's usually where my head is at in those situations. Like when I'm max stress, in periods of time in my life when I'm just at peak stress, I think I mentioned this before, I just watch nature documentaries. Just absolute brain shut off, but yeah. All right, everybody. Taptia says, Morge, you have 2 modes. I just want some stimulating visuals, and I see something greater, so I gotta put in effort. I mean, I think that's an accurate way to say it. I'm not always in analysis mode. Sometimes I just want something light and fun. Hence, solo leveling. I'm not going to overanalyze it, because all I'm asking for it is to be engaging and fun for me. That's it. Hunter x Hunter, it's a much more cerebral series. I can't go reading that half-cocked, I guess, without prior... Because I remember with the previous batch of chapters that I read, I watched Grand Line Reviews, catch-up video, and then I reread the whole arc, and then I had so much more understanding of everything that was going on. With this, I'm just like, I could sit and try and decipher and remember every single guard's mentality and roles and everything like that, and what this means for the bigger picture. But I was like, I fucked up starting the stream, not prepared. Hunter x Hunter is not a series that I, at least, maybe other people can. It's not a series that I can just jump into after a couple-year gap and just remember everything that's going on clearly, or have a good understanding of current events. So for me, that's a series that, just requires a bit more. The Lowman 123, thanks for the 5. They didn't fight Loki, Loki just beats him up. We don't see Harold attack. Yeah, but it's not like Harold gives right away. It's not like Harold gets back up and is like, I'm back to my senses. Dude, come on. He says he's back to his senses after the fight continues. Loki keeps fighting him, meaning that he's not back to his senses at that point in time. If he was, he would be like, hey, I'm back to my senses. Harold literally says I'm back to my senses only for the moment. Only for the moment. Meaning this is the first moment that Harold is back to his senses, dude. I don't know what, like, the character literally says it. He says only for the moment. I don't know what to say, man. Slowpoke Picnic, thanks for the 3. Imu really rocking. Magatsumi loved Straw Hats this chapter. Yeah, I'm so excited for the Straw Hats progression this chapter. I'm so excited for the Straw Hats this chapter. All right, after this chapter. I'm just loving Elbaf. This is heading towards potentially a 10 out of 10 arc for me. Again, only 10 out of 10 arcs for me in One Piece. There's 3. Water 7 Enies Lobby, Sabaody, and Marineford. This is already a clear 9 for me. Easy 9. Depends on how it is brought home, because the last arc I had at a 9 was Egghead, and then that I didn't love the ending. I think I had Whole Cake at a 9 as well, and then I didn't love the ending, right? So, but this for me is in that same spot. It's at a 9. I'm just curious to see how the whole thing plays out, and yeah, I'm just loving this arc. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and with that, I will talk to you all later.